Good evening and welcome to the regular board meeting of the Bellevue School District Board of Directors. Today is Thursday, May 4th, and the time is 4:30 p.m. At this time, we will do roll call.
Jane Harris.
Christine Chu just announced her name. Seema Sarafan.
Joyce Shuey.
Watson.
Art Jarvis, interim superintendent.
If we could please advance the slide. At this time, we're going to ask our executive director, Mr. John Harrison, who I understand is standing in because our student who is going to speak tonight fell ill. And as we thought of who might be inclined to lead us through our Pledge of Allegiance and land acknowledgement, we thought we might ask a gentleman who works for our district and supports us all the time, who was born Canadian, but naturalized to an American citizenship, if he would lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I'd be happy to. Thank you, President Sarafan. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. We acknowledge that we are on the indigenous land of the Coast Salish peoples who have reserved treaty rights to this land, specifically the Duwamish and Snoqualmie tribes. We thank these caretakers of this land who have lived and continue to live here since time immemorial. We reflect on the historic context that brings us to reside on this land and accept responsibility to interrupt erasure. We commit to an ongoing partnership with the Snoqualmie tribe as we listen to, learn from, and lead with their guidance.
Thank you. So at this time, we will go to item 1.6, which is acknowledgements. There are many. So, however, since we had some things drop off our calendar, I will do my best to say all of them. This is Asian Pacific Island Heritage Month. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, Jewish American Heritage Month, Military Appreciation Month, National Physical Education and Sport Month, National Preservation Month, AP Testing Month, Better World Day, and May 1st through May 5th was National Physical Education and Sport Week. May 1st was School Principals Day. May 5th was Better World Day. May 5th was also Children's Day. Will be Better World Day, will be Children's Day. Tomorrow is also Cinco de Mayo. It is also School Lunch Hero Day. It is Vesak Day. Next week, May 8th through May 12th, is Teacher Appreciation Week. May 10th is School Nurse Day. May 12th is School Communicators Day. May 14th is Mother's Day. May 15th is Peace Officers Memorial Day. May 15th through May 19th is Educational Bosses Week. So we thank and celebrate all of those important people and those holidays. So thank you. At this time, I ask for a second to my approval, to my motion to approve the agenda.
A second.
Okay, all those in favor of approving the agenda as written, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, hearing no opposition, the motion carries. We move now to the consent agenda. I ask for a second to my motion to approve the consent agenda. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Second.
Okay.
Okay. If there's no discussion, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Hearing no opposition, the motion carries. I now look to the superintendent for his update.
Thank you,
Jarvis?
President Sarafan. As you know, we've been trying during the superintendent updates to continue the annual plan progress reports. Tonight, we're scheduled for priority 8 and 9, which is the global competency as we wrap up this 5-year strategic plan that you have been working on. So Deputy Superintendent Eva Collins has been our champion on the global competency, and I would ask her to begin the report.
Thank you, Dr. Jarvis. Next slide, please. Here you'll see that there are 2 global competency priorities in the annual plan this year under the area of creators of their future world. The first, the shared vision part, is an effort to develop a shared vision and understanding of global competency with our stakeholders. And if you recall, we did a lot of sharing last year at the district level with the Superintendent Community Advisory Council, with EAAC, student groups, and district leaders. But we didn't do as much with our educators or at the school level. We had such a focus on recovery last year. And so this year, every school developed goals on their school improvement plan to align with the shared vision and deepened understanding of global competency. Our leaders have been igniting the idea and concept of global competency in their schools this year. The second effort has been happening with teaching and learning in that department. They've made tremendous progress in revising curriculum and developing learning experiences that are great examples of global competency. And we're going to share a few of those with you today. Next slide, please. This is just a reminder of how global competency is commonly defined, and it provides us with a framework to revise curriculum and develop learning experiences for students that require them to examine issues, understand and appreciate varied perspectives, engage effectively with people who have different lived experiences, and ultimately to take action for collective well-being and sustainability. And we know this is important and have heard testimony from many of our students this year here in our board meetings about the critical importance of experiences like these that build their knowledge and skills as globally competent people. They don't always use those words exactly, but there is a connection between what our students are telling us and what this approach to education can provide. I'd also like to add that sustainability is not limited to environmental issues, even though we typically hear about and talk about the environmental sustainability. But when we talk about local and global issues and sustainable development, we're also talking about economic sustainability, social sustainability, as well as environmental. Most major issues cross all of these areas. Next slide, please. On this slide, you'll see a timeline of events this year, starting with a kickoff in August at our Leadership Institute. The Teaching and Learning Department has taken on the lion's share of the work around global competency this year, involving our educators and students in the design and improvement of units and lessons that still meet learning objectives and standards as expected, but in a way that is highly engaging and relevant. The Professional Development Day in March provided a great opportunity for educators to engage with each other and deepen their understanding of global competency. We heard and we saw so much enthusiasm from educators, administrators, and the students who spoke at our March PD, and we're thrilled with the opportunities for innovation. We hope that you feel inspired and excited about the work our educators have done so far and the potential this effort has for the future of education in Bellevue and the positive impact our students are having. And now, Executive Director Sharon Couts would like to share with us some examples.
Thanks, Eva. Hi, for the record, I'm Sharon Couts, Executive Director of Teaching and Learning, and I will be sharing an update on our second priority. Could you go to the next slide, please? Sorry, Monica. Around curriculum and instruction related to global competency. Our main focus with this priority is to provide our students with a rich set of learning experiences in grades P through 12 that prepares them to be creators of their future world. Next slide, please. So I'm going to share some of the specifics about our work this year in the Teaching and Learning Department. During the fall and the winter, we dug deep into high quality instruction connected to universal design for learning, social emotional learning practices, WIDA and the language routines, and how all these instructional practices connect to global competency. It was important to really ground us in instruction first, so that as we embed global competency units into our existing curriculum, we're centering it on the high quality instruction and the pedagogical shifts needed for this work. After midwinter break, we were heavily involved in planning for March PD. We had over 1,100 educators attend the event. There were about 100 different sessions, all connected to high quality instruction and global competency. And I'll be sharing about that a little bit more in just a few minutes. But basically, our work this year has been about infusing instructional practices with real-world contexts that relate to students' lives so that students see the value in what they are learning and can make a difference in the world. We'll be continuing this work during the spring and into the summer. However, it's going to take us a few years with the eventual goal that each student has several learning experiences in each grade level across P12 where they learn the content through a global lens. And of course, as always, we're continually updating and improving units as the times and the issues change. We want our resources to be nimble enough to change with what is going on in the world, and we'll work in collaboration with our students as we embed global competency in the instruction and the curriculum. Next slide, please. So while we've been focusing on global competency all year, we introduced the term solutionary at our March PD. Our theme for the event was raising a generation of solutionaries. I know you've heard Dr. Aramaki share this term, but it's basically a person who identifies inhumane, unjust, and unsustainable systems and looks for and develops solutions to make the world a better place. We had several absolutely amazing student and educator speakers as our keynote at the March Professional Development Day to share their work for this year. And this idea of being a solutionary really resonated with our students and our educators at this event. And in addition to the speakers, we also shared the video that you are about to see. It includes many more examples of solutionaries and global competency that has been happening across our district this year. And it is 5 minutes long, so sit back, relax. I'm sorry I don't have popcorn for you, but it is a little bit longer than a normal video would be, but I think it's worth seeing.
So that students build the capacity. In the Bellevue School District, we are educating students on global competency so that students build the capacity to examine local, global, and intercultural issues, to understand and appreciate the perspectives and worldviews of others, to engage in open, appropriate, and effective communication with people from many cultures, and to act for collective well-being and sustainable development. At the Bellevue School District, we are committed to raising a generation of solutionaries. You may be wondering, what is a solutionary? A solutionary is someone who develops humane, healthy, and sustainable solutions to make the world a better place. We recognize the value of preparing students to be globally competent with the skills to communicate with diverse audiences, bridging geographic, linguistic, ideological, and cultural differences. Our language programs celebrate the strength of our diverse community and promote multilingualism and social cultural competence. Our vision is to provide technology solutions for an innovative education where students effectively problem solve and lead for positive local and global change. They develop global awareness and cultural competency and learn advanced skills in processing and applying information through the effective use of technology and engineering. Our educators are integrating computer science in multiple content areas. They work collaboratively across BSD to develop more inclusive and innovative technology lessons for all students. Assistive technology is one of the core strategies that schools use to support students with learning differences. In Bellevue, we know that all students are creators of their future world. Innovative assistive technology tools empower all students to be a solutionary. Kindergarten students learn the impacts of climate change on penguins in Antarctica. They are learning how to investigate the world beyond their immediate environment by connecting with a penguin researcher in Antarctica. They also learn about problems in parks and how to create innovative solutions. We are igniting a generation of informed voters by helping our first graders to understand voters' rights and become change agents for a better world. Our second grade students learn about important issues in the local environment and how to be a change maker.
I think it's important to teach young learners about change makers because there's so much potential for them to become one. And because often I think people underestimate the power that young people have in our communities and within themselves. And so seeing other change makers, especially young change maker, gives them more power to feel like they can create change because they absolutely can.
Third graders examine the causes contributing to the decline of the native kokanee salmon in the Puget Sound and develop potential solutions. Our fourth graders engage with native art and cultures of the Pacific Northwest Coast and collaborate with the Snoqualmie tribe. And in fifth grade, our students learn about our local and global communities by investigating and recognizing multiple and diverse perspectives. Our students care about global issues like protecting the environment. Sixth graders learn about the 17 sustainable goals and then develop creative solutions by taking agency to make a positive difference for our planet and the lives of people around the world. Middle school students reimagine the middle school experience to offer solutions for a more student-centered education. Our high school robotics teams do outreach programs to inspire our younger students about STEM.
Hi, so we're the Newport Robotics team, and this is our robot. We're currently at an outreach event where we're teaching elementary schoolers about a robot, about STEM, and the organization we're under called FIRST.
Students in our Cisco program learn networking skills to provide access to technology in our local community and schools abroad. Our students went to Antigua over midwinter break to provide internet access to local schools. They also hold mock Congress sessions for local policy to develop solutions for a more sustainable and humane community in King County.
Madam Chair, I can confirm the sense of the chair that the nays have carried.
All right, the nays have carried. Thank you, Representative.
And they take action to provide shelter by building tiny homes for people experiencing homelessness in our local communities. There are many other amazing examples of raising a generation of solutionaries across the Bellevue School District. We empower our students to be innovative thinkers, to value each other's humanity, and to act for the collective well-being and promote sustainable development. It takes our whole community to make the world a better place.
No, just if there are questions, we're happy to take questions.
Okay, so are there any board directors who have any questions or comments? So I know we had some on Monday, but if there's anybody who'd like to speak, Director Chu?
Yeah, thanks. So I think there are a couple of things. I'm really proud of our district for championing this and not only throwing it into, it was a big deal to put this piece into our vision, but it's an even bigger piece to actually translate it into some meaningful activities and learning in our classrooms. And I'd like to celebrate all the work that we've done to permeate the system with this. I think it's really important. I do also want to call out some things that we talked about on Monday and make one suggestion for the future for the board to think about. So on Monday, we talked about how important it is that as our kids are learning and solving problems and really contributing effectively to things, that we also recognize that they're also learning. So when our kids go to Antigua and provide technology and solutions like we acknowledged in the video, they are also afforded an opportunity to learn about how technology gets deployed in a different context and a different environment. And there are a lot of things that they have the ability to learn. And it'd be great to see a little more infusion of that aspect into our videos and our materials so that we're very intentional with our students and recognizing that they have the power to be part of solutions but they are not solving problems for the rest of the world. Their power is to solve them with the rest of the world, to be a powerful part of that. And I think that that comes from us in our district and the mentality we take and how well we include stakeholders. When we solve problems, do we model that for kids? Do we include our families, our educators, our students in creating solutions? So I think we are doing awesome work. There is an opportunity for us to really highlight that aspect in the way that we deploy this curriculum and the way that we promote it. So I hope we'll keep growing it, and I hope we'll develop the more inclusive piece. And then the second thing I wanted to say is I believe that there is an opportunity here for us to consider a policy, and that policy would be on innovation. And I can talk about it more extensively later, but what I wanted to just put out there is for our students to always be globally competent, it's important that their education evolves and that we are constantly attentive both to how we use and employ innovative strategies in the way we educate. And that's not limited to instruction or curriculum or activities. It's kind of an infusion across, which is why I'm thinking of it as a policy, just like you'd have a policy on, freedom of speech and all these other things that contribute to education. Additionally, it's important in how we confront the way the world around us is growing and innovating. For example, right now, ChatGPT is a huge force, and it has a lot of great things to offer our community. It also has a lot of liabilities, and it hasn't settled into how we are in education. So that's a place where we need to be leaders, not just in telling people, but in inviting our community together, our educators, our families, our students, to come together and define how things like that fit in. So I think that we're doing great work. I think we can help define in policy both how we promote the use of innovative educational techniques and opportunities, and how we embrace the evolution of our surrounding world. And we define it, we take it as cutting edge, and we figure out how things go together. And I think we as a board can support this work and really help it to propel forward. Thank you.
I'm going to go to Vice President Shu only because I saw her hand up first, and then I'll go to Director Aris.
Thank you. First of all, I love the video. It's really great. And it is fabulous that as a community, we've made a commitment to being creators of the future world and to global competency defined the way that it was. So thank you for that. I wanted to separately, but during the meeting, just ask us all to be very aware of, I did not notice it right away, but we didn't have our translations on at first. And this is one of those things, again, that if we don't have somebody watching for it and it becoming normalized, then it's too easy to have fall off the radar. And if I can make the suggestion that for our videos too, which I know on YouTube, we typically will have different languages, but we can lose people either because they are deaf or because they don't understand English as well. And so I'd like to keep saying that let's do everything we can to build into what we're doing, whether it's creating a video or having conversations to make it as inclusive as possible. I wanted to just briefly mention too that it's really hard for people to say those things because there is this pressure to always tell people who are in control of things or in power that they do a fabulous job. And so it's really hard to criticize or appear to be critiquing. And so I encourage folks who might feel like they're being critiqued or criticized to understand that there is a power imbalance naturally. And so that when I bring voice to this, it's not to critique or to be critiqued for critiquing. It's because I want to make sure that all of us are thinking about everybody and the different experiences they may have watching this wonderful video or not being able to experience it. Thanks for the opportunity to say that.
Director Aris?
Thank you very much for the video and just the overall presentation of the global competency. One of the asks I would like to do at this point is do another presentation next year where you present how global competency, especially at the high school level, how it is actually infused into the classrooms. I see the examples are more of the after-school programs or a combination of specific program, but I would love to see how it is infused into the just the regular curriculum, and so that not just those who have certain desires like robotics or STEM of very specific narrow pathway, but that they all have an opportunity to develop these skill sets.
I'm going to see if Director Watson has anything.
Yeah, I have a couple of thoughts. When I did really like the video, it's got a very positive tone and it makes me want to be here and a part of things. But I also like the way it was very specific about like, here's what the kindergartners are going to do, here's what the first graders, second grade, so forth. So that makes it real and not just, fluff or some kind of marketing piece. So I really liked it. And then I also it made me think though about how we're evolving. So when I first came to the school district, we were sort of in the multicultural potluck stage of inclusion and diversity. And we are moving forward, I think, consciously to real inclusion. And by that, I also mean inclusion in decisions and ultimately how things will be done with our family outreach. So that is our goal, but I feel like we're on the path.
Okay, I would just add that I would say the only additional thing I have to say beyond what others have stated is I really liked the continuum of knowledge to essentially empowerment and action. I thought that was really well articulated, and although I wouldn't say I jumped up and down at the term solutionaries, I'm coming around to it. So I think it does a good job of sort of bringing to life what that means. So I think that's what I had. So thank you. Dr. Jarvis?
Just as we close this portion, I think probably a theme you'll hear me repeat over the next month or two is that there's a wonderful challenge here, an invitation to the community to join the Bellevue schools as we look for change, as we look towards a future, as we create a future. I have this wonderful staff that you're watching their products and their work, and it's been fabulous. My challenge is how do I and others open up the world for them to really take risks and go to places that we've never been before in the Bellevue schools, not just stay in the safe harbor of the excellent performance that's here, but to go to places. So I refer to the artificial intelligence as one of those could scare the heck out of all of us and probably should scare us. And yet my invitation is for our community and our staff to lead into that as this future world that clearly is just a few steps ahead of us and maybe not very far. So I take great pride in the presentation, and I say thank you to all the work that went into it. And then in there is the challenge and the invitation. Thank you, Madam President.
Okay, thank you. So we now move to item 4, which is public comment. And I understand we have 2 people who've indicated a desire to speak tonight. We're going to project on screen the public comment guidelines, and I will give, as we do always, just an overview of public comment. So this is the time during our board meetings where we receive public comment, and the slide above on screen shows the details around it, but we remind you that essentially you can also communicate with us by email and voicemail, and that we have rules around public comment, but we start with our gratitude for receiving your public comment and our appreciation for the thoughtful input of our community. Because of the limits of our board calendar, we limit public comment to 20 minutes and each remark to no more than 2 minutes. We will listen to all public comments carefully. We generally do not respond. We do ask our speakers to ensure that they are engaging in a civil manner, not engage in any form of communication that would be identified as unacceptable, which is outlined very clearly in our guidelines, but it includes slander and libel, invasion of privacy, obscenities and harassment, intimidation, bullying, or discrimination. We also cannot accept public comment on pending investigations involving student discipline, allegations of employee misconduct, and allegations of discrimination or harassment, and that's in order to preserve our ability to hear appeals. Again, we thank you, and we want you to know that while we will be listening to all comments intently, we generally do not respond to your comments in this setting. So at this time, I ask Executive Director Harrison to perhaps let us know who our first speaker is and to ensure that their name is projected. Are we going to start with the virtual? Okay.
Thank you, Jess. Yes, we're going to start with the virtual. So we will go to Mr. Gopal Paul on who is joining us virtually.
Okay, thank you. My name is Gopal Pal, and I am a high school senior at Interlake High School. And today I would like to make a proposal that aligns with the board's initiative to diversify BST students' education. So I would like the board to consider adding a curriculum, adding a class to the music curriculum, namely the Indian community in Bellevue has been growing for the past many years, and I believe adding a music class for uh, Indian instruments and incorporating Indian musical education into our music program will be of great benefit to diversify our education, and it will also be very interesting and relevant to the students. For example, Indian music is known for its tranquility, and exposure to this music will provide students, especially secondary students, with the opportunity to take refuge from their busy and hectic schedules. And on top of all of this, students may uh, uh, use the class towards their graduation credits. So I think adding Indian classical music classes, namely the tabla drums or the Indian bamboo flute, and teaching them either separately as electives or incorporating them into the current musical syllabus and curriculum will be a great idea, and it will make the music education that BST offers. It will make that more diverse and broad. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We call now on our second speaker, who I believe is here in person, Mr. Joel Ingraham.
Good evening. I'd like to address you as advocates tonight, and I'd also like to call our school leaders advocates, because that's what you are. Whether you're here volunteering or whether this is your career, you truly are advocates. And I've seen that as I've watched this board and the school district over many years. You guys have a passion for equity and social justice, and you have spent long hours championing those causes. And you have prioritized making sure that every student, and if not yet, hopefully someday, will feel safe and in a position ready to learn in our school districts. As students become safe and have the ability to then focus on their academics, I'd like to challenge this board to spend more time and to refocus on academic success. There are students struggling in our district, as there are every district, and how can we spend more time looking at the data and seeing what we can do to actually reach those students and be effective. There is lots of good work in the district that's happening on this front. It appears that UFly, which is a phonics curriculum, very economical as well, will be available to all teachers. It looks like letters is continuing. However, cohort 3 has been delayed for 6 months. And on the district has a solid foundation in many items. But what is going to happen and continues to happen is a student's experience it depends upon what school they're in or what teacher they get. There's not enough universal supports across the board. So when we talk about academic supports, can we move to a concept of mastery? Can we get our students to actually have that foundational skill mastered? And if not, can we spiral back and hit it again in the curriculum? How can we make sure that when a student struggles and an accommodation or is made for them, how do we make it so the standards aren't lowered? I've had students who have been struggled and they've been told, well, just don't do that. But we need to say, no, I'm going to walk with you. I'm going to continue. If I'm not teaching it correctly, I'm going to adjust my teaching. I'm going to look at the data and I'm going to walk with you. And no matter what happens, you will achieve academic success. For our students that struggle and for all of our students, that's the commitment we need. Thank you.
Thank you. Executive Director Harrison, am I right that we have no other speakers, or is there anyone else?
That is correct. No other speakers.
Okay, so thank you. That concludes our public comment, and we now go to our board business. I believe that we may have a, Executive Director Harrison, we have a speaker on item 5.1, correct?
We do. Executive Director of Schools, Patty Siegworth.
Okay, great. Thank
will
you.
be addressing you on this topic.
Good evening, Board. Patty Sigworth, Executive Director of Schools.
And Joseph Kempestia, Instructional Technology Curriculum Leader, supporting alternative pathways, including Graduation Alliance and our in-district credit recovery program.
And we do have a presentation, if we could get that up, please. Thank you. Great. Board, the Grad Alliance School Improvement Plan should look familiar to you. It's been posted in prior board meeting agendas. We've provided you written responses to your inquiries related to Grad Alliance earlier this week. Tonight, we are seeking approval of the Grad Alliance SIP as required by the state for a re-engagement school. We'll provide you tonight a review of Grad Alliance programming, the related goals, progress toward those goals, as well as our next steps. Thank you for your interest in the services provided to our students and families through Grad Alliance. It's appreciated, honestly.
Next slide, please. In 2010, the state legislature passed engrossed second substitute House Bill 1418, which provided for the creation of re-engagement programs for youth ages 16 to 21, which are called Open Doors programs. These Open Doors programs are primarily designed to support students that have dropped out of school or have the potential to drop out, providing another pathway for re-engagement. Graduation Alliance is an Open Doors program with which we contract services for our students as one pathway toward graduation. The primary goal of this Graduation Alliance Open Doors program is to support students in completing their remaining graduation course requirements so that they earn their high school diploma. Graduation Alliance is one of several Open Doors programs accessed by our students and the only Open Doors program that is aligned to programming within our district. Other Open Doors programs require students to withdraw from our district to participate in their re-engagement programming. Next slide, please. For this demographic slide, a reminder about these data percentages. Due to the small numbers of students in these groupings, it only takes a few students to alter the percentages dramatically, and we take that into consideration. With this understanding, disproportionality in enrollment in Graduation Alliance currently exists, which is an area of focus for our district's graduation success team. Female identifying students, students speaking a first language other than English, and students identified as Hispanic, Latino, Latina, Latinx are overrepresented. Also, students identified as Asian are underrepresented in this data. Next slide, please. These are the 3 school improvement plan goals for the Graduation Alliance program. The first 2 goals are specific to the student outcomes in this Open Doors re-engagement school. And the 3rd goal focuses on providing more effective services and programming within the student's district high school. That 3rd goal is about reducing reliance on the Graduation Alliance Open Doors program for student re-engagement and more effectively serving these students in our schools when possible. The next slides provide status updates on these 3 goals so far this school year, and Dr. Sigworth will speak on those.
Currently, students in the Grad Alliance re-engagement program earn more credits on average in a school year than our students enrolled in our district high schools. Students served in Grad Alliance were previously not on track to graduate or not attending school. Thus, for these students to actually earn a diploma and meet graduation course requirements, it is important that we accelerate the attainment of credits. The 12-month school calendar, coupled with access to select Grad Alliance support staff 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, has assisted students with attaining the necessary course credits to graduate. Next slide, please. Given the goal of Open Doors program is for students to earn a high school diploma, a graduation goal is clearly relevant. Next slide. Our goal is to provide appropriate and effective services for each student in our district. As a district, we need to continue to improve and alter our programming and services to meet each student's unique needs. The Summit program, which is offered at each of our comprehensive high schools during the regular school day, is just one example of unique and effective in-district program services. Summit program includes some of the effective components that we've learned from the Grad Alliance programming as reported to us by our students, such as one-on-one case management, adaptable course programming, and joint collaborative goal setting while recognizing and celebrating incremental improvements. Next slide. Over time, we have increased support staff's understanding and awareness of in-district program offerings and services. Doing so has resulted in more equitable access to unique in-district programming for our students district-wide. And it has reduced the need for select students to access Open Doors programming outside of our district to achieve graduation or post-secondary education. Remaining in the school communities is of very high importance to most of our students. Thus, it's of high importance to us. Any questions prior consideration of approval of the Grad Alliance SIP?
I don't have any, but I'd like to know if any board directors have any questions that remain. Okay, I don't see any, so, oh, Director Chu.
Yeah, I just want to ask, the next steps don't fully capture some of the things that you called out as issues earlier in the program. I think they sort of do, but I'm not sure. One of the things you called out was a disproportionality of representation. And I'm wondering, in the ways that we're executing on next steps, is there attention being given to particular groups that are overrepresented to ensure that they really are getting access to these new opportunities to meet graduation requirements?
Certainly. So as Joseph Kempesty pointed out, whereas you have the data in percentages by subgroup, we know the kids by name, by face, by need. And what we found in some particular subgroups is the regular school day that we have has, in a comprehensive high school, has limitations with adaptability, flexible options for course requirements. So like the Summit program that we offer in our comprehensive high school has much more flexibility for folks, We have students that are working, that are supporting families, that have requirements outside the school day that make it difficult to fit in our comprehensive 7-period a day. And through the summit programming and district offerings, we've been able to provide a more flexible program for them to allow them, should they so choose and desire, to remain in their school communities, earn a diploma, whether that be through Summit, other options we provide in district, or with the assistance of Grad Alliance. There's clear direct alignment to the students that we know by name and the programming and goals that we have for next steps.
Did that answer your question? Or is there any other follow-up?
I think that sort of answered the question. What I hear is Dr. Siegworth is saying that we're very individualized about this. And if there are trends in the individualized attention, we pick up on them. And this is one of them, the summer opportunities. And that you're just going to keep doing that attention to the individualized piece to see how to solve this because the numbers are manageable.
One of the positions that we have in our districts, which is Joseph's position, I'm not sure you'd find a position of that sort in any other district in the state. He remains very closely tied to our students served in our programs in district that are unique and in our out of district open doors programs, connects with the families, reinforces their progress, makes adjustments real time, connects with Grad Alliance. And it's really the interests of our students, their needs and their stories that are driving the programming. And we could have one student that has very different programming than any student in our entire district. It's the beauty of the adaptability.
Okay, at this time, I would ask for a second to my motion to approve the graduation Alliance School Improvement Plan.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Okay, thank you. I do thank the district for the superintendent and staff for having us pull this out from the consent agenda and give it its own time. I think it was quite valuable. So thank you.
Thank you.
We go to item 5.2, and this is the adoption of resolution 2023-002 to increase the debt service fund appropriation. I had asked our deputy superintendent if she would answer a few questions that, or speak to a few key topics that I think are just worth grounding us in. And it was essentially what this is, why it's needed, and what impact it has and doesn't have. I think you've addressed it before, but it helps to frame it before we actually go forward. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity. This resolution is asking you to raise the budget limit on our debt service fund by $1.5 million. The debt service fund is used to pay the principal and interest on our outstanding bonds. And we're asking for this increase because due to the rising interest rates and the forecast of continuing increases in interest rates, we decided to sell bonds earlier than we had originally planned when we developed the budget for the 22-23 school year. Overall, the earlier sale of these bonds will save taxpayers money because we are able to sell them at lower interest rates as opposed to the rates that we are now seeing in the marketplace. And while we're asking the board to increase the budget for the debt service fund, it will not have any impact on taxpayers because we currently do have the money available in this fund. And I'm happy to answer any additional questions.
Okay. I know we had asked questions before, but if any remain, I'd like to make sure we cover them. Director Watson, did you have a question? I couldn't tell from your...
No, we have the money, no additional impact to taxpayers, just trying to time the market right to get the best rate.
Okay, if any other directors have questions, please let me know. Director Chu?
I have just one comment or request, and that is, in general, when we get to the point where we need to approve this particular piece, it's kind of too late not to approve it. Like, we can't default on our debts and stuff. So the real decision-making point on this happened when we approved the sale. So I asked on Monday, and I just want to make clear, it would be very helpful if the risks of this, like it might not be a high risk or whatever, but if those were identified at the initial decision points so that we and the public are able to provide comment sooner. Had we been informed, I don't believe that we would have taken a different course of action. I believe our district was very responsible. I still think it's helpful to provide the information and an actionable time frame. So just a request for the future.
Okay, it looks like that was noted. All right, with that, I ask for a second to the motion to adopt Resolution 2023-02 to increase the debt service fund appropriation. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, the motion carries. I turn now to Executive Director Harrison for item 5.3, which is the policy memo. And I think that essentially tees us up for our 2161 and 5515 first readings and your feedback, your revision following our feedback on Monday.
Correct. Thank you, President Serafan. So I'm wondering, on both policies, you've had two opportunities now to weigh in: the May 1st pre-planning session, and then the same thing on April the 3rd. That's the good news. Again, it's challenging after a few iterations. There's a lot of track changes. So I'm wondering if we can do what we did last school board meeting, and that is show the clean version, and I'll walk you through the changes. And I believe that Monica emailed you a shared document. If there are any, if there's feedback through the meeting, you can do that in real time. Does that make sense?
It does. So you'll be projecting the clean version.
Clean version, thank you. I'm going to ask Jesse if you can make it. There we go.
John, I don't see an email with the.
We received one before, I think, the Monday meeting, but I'm not sure if we got one today.
Just checking on that.
But
Yeah, it was sent apparently this afternoon to board@bsd405.org.
Either way, how about if we start with our presentation? Because I think at this point you're showing us what changes you made since getting the feedback we walked through on Monday. So I think at a high level, we weren't going to be wordsmithing at this moment. So we could continue, and you could take feedback from board directors.
Yeah. And in tomorrow's update, I'll provide you a link to provide individual feedback between now and second reading. So what you see highlighted in yellow are substantive changes that have occurred since Monday. It's not only your feedback, it's also incorporated the feedback of the community engagement work that Jeff Jorgensen, Director of Special Education, and I have been engaged in. So there's feedback from a couple of different sources. So that first highlighted word and identified is critical in that prior to this version, there was no reference to the identification of students who may require special education services. So that's an important word. Prior it said unique. And then the rest of that paragraph, beginning with lines 7 through 10. Specially designed instruction with related services for eligible students will be tailored to meet their identified needs with the goal of developing skills and attaining learning standards needed to access post-secondary education, employment, and independent living. You may recall the version that you saw on Monday talked about student autonomy, et cetera, and feedback from key community members was that language felt othering to a degree. So we replaced it with the true goal of being able to access what happens after the K-12 experience. And then the district is further committed to developing a culture of belonging in all schools where all aspects of the community, of the school community, are accessible, equitable, and inclusive. So a couple of additional words there, specifically accessible and equitable. The under provision of services, lines 13, 14 is new language. It is the responsibility of the district to ensure that instruction, extracurricular activities, and school environments are accessible to all students regardless of their support needs. And then lines 16 through 18 further specify what was absent in the version you saw on Monday, and that was the identification piece. So the district will conduct child-find activities in compliance with state and federal regs intended to reach all students with a suspected disability and in need of receiving special education and related services. So scroll down, Jess, to line 22, if you would, please. The language around least restrictive environment was in the previous version, but again, we've emphasized that what we really want to do is support full participation in all learning experiences in the least restrictive environment. Lines 24, 25 is new language, again, feedback from active community members around our inclusionary practices. So the district utilizes inclusionary practices aligned with the principles of multiple systems of support model. And you may recall that Director Aris actually asked about that piece on Monday. And then line 31, 32, there's a couple of key words. We had collaboration with families and students in the development of IEPs. What was missing was based on evaluative data. So that's new language. And we're almost done. Scroll down, Jess. Keep going. There. That mediation or resolution agreements is a legal piece. We talked about this on Monday, and the feedback that you all had was really good. It felt like the sentence was just kind of left hanging, and the suggestion that was made that it needed to be introduced. So working with General Counsel McMinamy, we came up with the following. In the event that the district and a family engage in mediation or resolution pursuant to Fed and state law regulations, the board authorizes the superintendent or designee to bind the district to a mediation or resolution agreement subject to the authority provided under District Policy 6210 for the expenditure of district funds and any administrative procedures related to the expenditure of district funds. Scroll down just a bit more, Jess, to the references. They're not highlighted, but at, I think, Director Watson's suggestion, we were missing a reference to 0130 equity and accountability, and that's now there. So those were the totality of the changes. And again, I want to thank community members and folks that we've been consulting with, and ask Director Jeff Jorgensen if I've missed anything or he would add anything before we hear additional feedback from you.
The only thing that I would actually add at this time is just how valuable the community input has been. That the discussions around this topic, this policy, has been something of great interest to the stakeholders that have been out there in the community. They've given us very specific feedback of the types of language they would like to have included, and I think that the first read, second read process that we are going through will give additional opportunities for people to take a look at the policy. So we're looking forward to that even after the revisions that are made after tonight.
President Serafin.
Oh, well, I wanted to just thank you because I thought you integrated the comments that I heard on Monday very well. I do recall, I noticed you highlighted, and I may not miss this, the mediation resolution agreements. Was there something specific there? I recall a comment from Director Chu, and I didn't know if that was something you wanted to speak to. And perhaps you did, and I didn't catch it.
Yeah,
but-
I did, and Director Chu's and others' feedback was that one sentence needed some introduction and explanation. So that's what, again, I work with General Counsel McMenemy, and that's the language that we're suggesting tonight to address that feedback.
All right. I didn't hear you address it, but maybe you did, so thank you. I thought, though, of the things that got highlighted in Monday, you did a nice job of integrating it. Director Chu?
Yeah, John, thank you, and thank you to Jeff Jorgensen for the work on this. My understanding, and I just want to check if this is correct before I make comments, is that this will now go through a continued process of engagement with stakeholders, so that families and students and experts and staff will be able to give further input?
Correct. And in the policy memo, there's a list of the engagements, and some of that is ongoing, and there's a couple more sessions that are scheduled between second reading. So short answer is yes.
Okay. So what I wanted then, I'll just make my comments with that in mind, because I think that stakeholders can speak well for themselves on these topics, but I want to make sure that we intentionally attend to them. So one of the comments I made on Monday was that I didn't feel like this reflected as written that we had high expectations for all students. And I think the change made on that was at the top of the policy, where it talks about.
Jess, do you want to go to the top? I'm sorry, Director Chu, just so we can see what we're talking here.
The top paragraph, I think that the change that maybe was supposed to address that was talking about developing skills and attaining learning standards needed to access post-secondary education, employment, and independent living.
Sorry, what line are you reading from? I just want to make sure I'm tracking.
Lines
8, 9.
Yeah.
I do like the line numbers, so that's a big help. Executive Director
8
Harrison.
and 9.
Okay, thank you.
I think that gets at some of it, but I don't know if it gets at all of it. So I would definitely I would request that you explicitly ask stakeholders if they feel that this policy reflects high expectations for whole child development.
Thank you.
The second thing I had asked about multiple types of disabilities. And so if you scroll down a bit, what I believe that you did to address that, where does it say 504? I saw it.
Yeah, it's lines 25 and below.
Thank you. Summarize their participation.
And that language, and that was the intent around.
No, that's not the language I want to call out. There's a part where it basically says who qualify through, oh, there it is. So lines 34 through 39. Okay. So effectively what we did is we didn't try to differentiate in buckets or whatever. We basically said we're going to serve the needs of students with disabilities, whether they qualify under this provision or that provision. I just want to make sure, are there any other reasons that someone could qualify for receiving these services, and are we being comprehensive?
Great. Okay.
And then I'm just going to go through these. I'm not expecting you to answer them all on the fly. And then one thing that I just don't see in here at all is something I brought up Monday that is really important. And that is, are we committing not only to helping students access services, but also learn to the extent possible to manage their disabilities? I noticed that we took out the word autonomy, and I was sad to see that go, because I certainly think we want to see autonomy. And I think particularly in the case of, well, not particularly, like in the case of many disabilities, these are things that students will have to deal with for their lives. And it's important that they are empowered to manage them, to know how to ask for help. And I don't see that in our policy. And I feel like that should be a commitment that we make to our students.
Yeah, that's a great question. As this, process evolves, obviously first reading, second reading, and this has been, in essence, the third version that you've seen, things change, and that we've not had the opportunity to go back and ask about the removal of the language that was suggested. We did include the language that was suggested, but I think that's a great question, and I understand your viewpoint. So thank you for that. We will ask about that. And like, for example, one of the sessions coming up is Jeff is going to be meeting with the Bellevue Special Needs PTSA. So that's obviously an important group.
Thank you.
Thank you, Director Chu.
I think Director Aris, sorry, I may not be reading that right. I think Director Aris is next.
I think it's Director Watson. Oh, okay. All right. Just kind of to piggyback on Dr. Chu's statement, I'm wondering if we could do something as part of the being autonomous of their own skills and ability to be independent and beyond K-12, if we could incorporate something that allows them like self-advocacy, one of those, which is a skill set I feel that it's often overlooked in education, because you think that they're learning that through their just everyday experience in school. But as we know that often students who have special education services, they tend to need additional support from staff. And often that ability to exercise that self-advocacy is taken away because we're giving them that additional hand. And I'd like to make sure that we institute that some kind of language in here that allows or encourages that self-advocacy skills. And
great, understood.
Director Watson?
Yeah, something has come to mind that I'm not sure whether you can code it into policy or whether it's something better dealt with in procedure or maybe on an individual basis. But what worries me is in line 8, 9, 10, the district is further committed to developing a culture of belonging in all schools where all aspects of the school community are accessible, equitable, and inclusive. And I think you can imagine that working out, you know, if you're in the classroom and you can work at your own pace, at the level with some help and so forth. But when it comes to group projects, do you get left out? When it comes to music, are you allowed to play in the concert, or are you kind of on one sidelined? If you're in PE, are you expected to stand there while the other kids play, or are you actually fully in the game? So I think that that might be an individual thing, that might be, I don't know, but I have heard some concerns over time from some students who like maybe were in the music class, but weren't really feeling included when it came concert time, that sort of thing. So I'm wondering if you can address that somewhere.
Great, thank you, Director Watson.
I didn't have anything additional except that some of what I felt were the additional pieces I thought might be better for procedure. So that's mine. Director Chu.
Yeah, in follow-up to what Director Watson said, and also in thinking about some other comments, I wonder on line 12, if there might be a way to instill our commitment, not just to access, but to engagement and growth. Because one of the comments that was made in the public comments today was a really great representation of something I've heard from parents over the years pretty consistently. But there are concerns about access doesn't mean being there and having someone complete the worksheet for my kid or telling them what to do. It means making sure that my kid has access to that opportunity to learn and grow and develop the skill. And I wonder if the focus on access is pulling us away from the appropriate focus on engagement and growth. So the actual experience of a child in being there and their growth as a person. And I wonder if this policy could be modified to better reflect that. I think there were some great modifications made to the top, but I think we could take another go and focus ourselves a little bit more and then read through the rest of it and see if there were tweaks that would support further that commitment to engage
and grow our students. I love that.
Thank you.
Shall we turn to 5515?
That would be great. Yeah, the clean version, please. Thank you, Jess. All right, so again, what you see in yellow is new, and ensuring in the first sentence, line 7, ensuring a healthy sense of well-being. The word healthy was an add from feedback from yourselves on Monday. And then some of the order, I've changed the order of some of the content that's presented. So in the commitment section, there was, language, and you may recall the discussion, is committed to, fully committed to. So I tried, and some of the feedback was that the language was soft. It wasn't calling, it wasn't strong enough in calling a call to action for the district. So there's been changes in that regard to make the language kind of more active. So this was one effort at that. The district is not only committed to that overarching statement around ensuring a healthy sense of well-being for staff, but that in addition to supporting their needs so they can be their best for students, we're committed to supporting mental health and staff members. And this, I think, Director Watson was really specific about calling out supporting staff members who may be experiencing secondary traumatic stress. So just going back a bit, you'll recall that initially this policy just dealt with secondary traumatic stress because it's required by legislation. We made the decision kind of collectively to broaden it. So I'm hoping that it's getting a little bit closer to meeting both needs. So the next section, beginning with line 12, goes on to explain much more succinctly than it did before what secondary traumatic stress is, and calls out that when staff may be experiencing secondary traumatic stress, it can be obviously not a positive thing for the individuals nor the school community that they work in. So lines 20, if you could scroll down a little bit, lines 20 to 23 kind of reframed the specificity required by the legislation around raising awareness on secondary traumatic stress, providing resources and support for employees experiencing the same. And in accordance with RCW, the district's health and wellness team will serve as a workforce mental health committee required by the statute. So one of the concerns expressed on Monday, again, around the kind of the fact that the policy was kind of vague is in part, and I said this on Monday, that this legislation that required this policy was well-intended legislation coming out of the pandemic. Not that secondary traumatic stress experienced by employees wasn't happening before, but it was exacerbated through the pandemic. And the state is is in kind of the beginning stages as well. I didn't share this on Monday, but there is a state workforce secondary traumatic stress advisory committee, and right now as we speak, they've reached out to employees across the state to complete a survey. In other words, the state is still in that place of figuring out the degree to which this is an issue and the support that's needed to work with schools and districts to address the issue. So one of the other pieces of feedback from Monday was that it wasn't really clear what the district health and wellness team does. So those first 3 bullets are new language and that you've not seen before. three things that the district's health and wellness team is working on. It gives you an idea of the kind of things that they're working on. Expanding employee resource groups. You may have been more familiar with the term we've used in the past. We've talked about affinity groups. So resource groups are potentially broader than racial affinity. But in industry, the term resource groups is used more frequently. So we use that language here. Promote and sponsor employee wellness initiatives. Various initiatives that are out there. There's a number of opportunities that, for example, the State Employee Benefits Board provides, as well as initiatives that are kind of locally anticipated. One example is we do have an employee wellness initiative with respect to mindfulness as a strategy. And then line 30, developing a peer support program. That's kind of specific to, when we have crises, and we learned from partnering with some of our first responders, the power of a peer support group. So we're looking at that. And then lines 31, the rest of the bullets, that's not changed, but at the bottom of the list, just if you could scroll down, this was a suggestion that came out on Monday from you, that recognizing trauma in others was important, and making sure that we provide resources and training to not only to deal with students, for example, facing trauma. Those would be the trauma-informed practices, but also recognizing trauma in their students and potentially in themselves or colleagues. And then the last addition was Director Chu was provided some really good feedback around, what is it specifically that the district health and wellness team is going to report on, and initially it was basically on post-traumatic, on secondary traumatic stress. So now it says the team will report to the board, staff, and community on workplace climate, staff well-being, and support for secondary traumatic stress in the workplace. Just a couple of more, just scroll down, Jess. I can't remember if there's anything. No, there wasn't. So those were the additions, and I would ask Executive Director for Student and Staff Engagement, Heather Edlund, if there's anything else you'd like to add. I've worked pretty closely with Heather on this. I think you all know that Heather works closely with our employee groups and is the lead for our district's health and wellness team. So Heather, anything to add to that? Sorry to put you on the spot.
No, I think we're good. I was just making sure that the light was green so you would be able to hear me. Hi. I don't think I have anything to add. I'm happy to add more specification or respond to questions either here or in another fashion on some of what those pieces are. But I would say, the district's health and wellness team has, like, this was coming out of our recognition that our employees and their wellness is important to us. It wasn't a result of the legislation. And so it's nice to see this kind of merging of priorities of legislation and OSPI with what we already recognized as a need, and the importance, I think, of our community partners and being able to support us with that. Our peer support program comes directly from our partnership with Bellevue Fire, and modeled after their peer support program that they use for the first responders there. So that peer support program and partnering with them. It also includes things that we've been able to partner with, let's say, Amazon or Microsoft, and how they sponsor affinity or resource groups and what those can look like. So it's been helpful in talking with various people in the community as well to be able to do that. I just added one other thing that we do is we're also researching additional employee support programs. So our EAP program is great and wonderful, and it also is not as culturally responsive as we'd like or as local as we like. Right now, their closest provider is in Idaho. So we're actually looking to expand that as well. And so that group is also researching, is EAP the current best provider, or are there other providers out there, and how might we expand upon those? So just to know that I think that we have a very dedicated group of folks who are very interested in their own wellness and the wellness of others. And I think it's a really exciting time. I'm excited that we're working out a policy on it.
And I'm glad, Heather, thank you for pointing out the piece on the EAP. This actually should have been highlighted, line 33. share mental health support information provided through an employee assistance program. It used to say through the district's employee assistance program, capitalized parentheses EAP. Now it's lowercase to allow for flexibility there, that we will provide mental health support through an employee assistance program, but not necessarily EAP. Does that make sense? Okay. President Serafan.
Okay, I think we have questions. We do have a study session tonight, and I'm mindful of that, so we'll try to cover them, but be brief. Director Watson? Oh, I thought, oh.
I had it up and
Okay, you went up and down. I think you were first, because I saw I was second.
I like where we're going with this. And my concern since we started talking about it has always just been that when you're in that situation and you're stressed out, you don't have like a lot of extra emotional resource to like click on a list of links and hope that none of them are, you know, not working and all of that. So I like the idea that we've added somebody you can call, and also, you know, the peer support program, somebody that if you don't have a lot of bandwidth to be able to cope with this, that you can go and that person can point you to where else you can go without you having to sit there and do a lot of research. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
Thank you for your revisions. I have one quick question, and I'm not insisting it be included. I just noticed I didn't see it included. I'd mentioned when we spoke that mindful of the input we had from students about being worried about noticing and being concerned about the mental health of their teachers, the educators who are often taking on so much of a load. I wondered, could we build in something that allows them, without creating I could say an HR problem, allows them to maybe either talk to someone, know where to go if they have a concern. Is that something that you on some level addressed, but it's not obvious, or did you explore it and come to a conclusion that that wasn't workable?
I think it needs to be further explored, but I understand that, and that point, so that we will look at that.
Okay, I appreciate it. It may not be, the policy may not be the right place. It might be procedure, but it feels like students need a place to be able to share a concern without having it go in a direction that may be problematic for a variety of reasons.
And as you know, that's a challenging piece. I understand the sentiment, and it's a good sentiment.
Okay.
We need to talk further about that piece.
Understand. Thank you.
Thank you, President Serafan.
Okay, I think Director Chu is next, and then Director Ars.
I like the idea of having a referral service, not just for students, but for teachers to refer teachers or other staff, each other, just be able to tell somebody who is in a non-evaluative, non-judgmental space who can be helpful, to have an opportunity to ensure that somebody's well-being is assured. I've got two quick questions specific to the policy. But on that front, I do think that could be a procedural detail or even just an implementation.
I think it's probably better for procedure. Yeah. It can also be abused, and I think that's something that comes to mind. So I'm mindful that it's not an easy suggestion to throw out there. So please go ahead.
So the first question I had is there's a section you said that if you go up a little bit, I think it's lines 20-ish, I'm not sure.
Jess, could you scroll up to line 20? Thank you.
That we're going to focus on raising awareness and treating it, but we lost the concept that we were going to actually try to reduce or prevent it. So I would consider including that we'd actually like to reduce it. And then in that spirit, one thing about this policy that strikes me is secondary traumatic stress is a valid concern. It's kind of very topical at this time. In the past, there have been several other things that have had an enormous impact on the well-being of our educators. Sometimes they're things that we do or don't do and that we could actually affect. And I wonder if there's a way to actually find out during the stakeholder engagement period that comes up, what are the top 10 things that that stress out our staff? Like, is it about, you know, too many initiatives, workload? Is it about uncertainty in job because we know that the district is making cuts and we don't know what's going to happen? Is like, what are the things that are actually contributing to the lack of well-being or less healthy staff day to day? And how could we work into this policy a commitment to regularly assess what the top causes of stress are and a commitment to specifically address those things without writing each of them into this policy because they will change over time? But I'm concerned that this policy is overly focused on a particular one and doesn't account for the breadth of stress that educators can feel. And I think we need to, like, the student policy that we have was adequately comprehensive. This one feels less comprehensive, and I think it's important that we acknowledge that.
Thank you.
Director Aris, did you have your hand up?
I did. I'd like to make a comment on this one, and then I'd like to actually go back to the special ed policy and make, I noticed something that was not, or it was taken out that I'd like to have it put back in. But for this one, I thank you very much for adding the statement about providing training. Can we add the word to each school or each facility or each building to make sure that we are.
Which line, Director Aris?
41, 42, is that the one?
Yes, okay. Yes. To make sure that we're really making sure that each building has someone, at least a person that is has that training, so that they, you know, it's a little bit easier for staff.
Yeah, understood. And with respect to going back to 2161, may I suggest, I'm watching your time, and we're 10 minutes over here, that when I provide a link for individual feedback in tomorrow's update, that you can get it to me that way?
Yeah, it has just says, sure, that's fine.
I can write it in now. I could just put a comment in rather than the language, if that's easier. I have it open. But what I heard you say was each, not just the general schools and staff.
Yeah, that and for this particular one, yes, yeah. But for
the 2161, I didn't catch all the comments.
No, for the special ed policy, I had on Monday I had suggested that we include language, really be specifying that when instead of just saying all staff, to make sure whether it is within parentheses or whatnot, to make sure that all staff doesn't, because I think there's an assumption that when we talk about special education, that it's special education departments, special education students, special education versus all staff, meaning across general, special ed, and every other. It's all, they're all
across
students.
The system.
Yes.
Understood. Thank you.
Okay, I think that concludes this section. I will actually I've got the documents open, so I'll put it in both, and you can always check the comment. Okay, I think we go now to our director discussion. I don't know if anybody wants to kick it off. Does any director would like to kick off director discussion? Director Aris?
Sure. I have a comment and a suggestion, I guess. As we talk about policies and as we make adjustments and create new policies, I know that it's a lot of lift for everybody to understand there's these policies that's been adjusted. One of the things, the questions that have been brought to me since the beginning of the year as we have changed the policy on, or the wordings on absences, and not all schools are fully up to date on even on that policy, which made me kind of think about access and to all of our communities with diverse language backgrounds. And as well as we were working through these last few policies and engaging our students and our larger community and giving them the opportunities to participate in the policies, I'm wondering, and I think I've already had this discussion with John a little bit about having on our website on front page where people could actually see the list of the policies that we're going to work on, and also maybe a format or form that they could click on the policy and click onto where they could input at their own time and will versus us constantly seeking them out, because there are policies some people are more interested in and than the others because it impacts them more, as well as there are students who like to engage, but maybe they're not in Bellevue High, they're at Smamish, or maybe they're at Big Picture, but they haven't really heard about it, but something's interested in their perusing. And I'd like to make it easily accessible as possible. And also talking about language and access, and we talk about making sure that our board meetings are accessible to our diverse language speakers. Is there a possibility where we can make sure that all of our policies can be accessed by our diverse language speakers with a translation service, so that it's easy access versus jumping through our very dense and massive web page to get to the information they need to know. I'd love to see that as something that is front and center, so people know their rights and how we are structured.
Well, I want to just build on that because I know our chief communications officer is probably listening, because I know that she's been thinking through ideas for the website and opportunities there. So I think we just described sounds really positive. I want to also say that it aligns a little bit with, I had asked a few meetings ago at a YouthLink meeting, so I wanted to also give you guys an update on YouthLink. I think a few meetings ago, I asked about how would you like to, all of you here, the students at YouthLink, tend to be students who are engaged with advocacy, with essentially civics, and you're participating and learning how to be on a board. So I asked, knowing that many of us in the board had thought about and talked about or at least the last year, but certainly before too, what about having students on our board, and what would that look like? So I was curious what they would say, and I filled out a couple questions. It took some prodding till they answered, and not everybody answered. But it was interesting because one of the things that you said, I can tell you in a second what they said more broadly, but along the way they specifically said to have weigh in on policies, and they definitely like the idea of surveys. I mean, they were interested and talked about potentially having representation on the board, but everybody also acknowledged it's never going to be all of us, and we don't know that student or two who's going to represent us will really do not a good job, but how cohesive could they be? It's not that easy. So they were ultimately saying, make it easier, make it just in time, make it so that we can see in our website, in how we engage, through an app or something else, what's going on. If it interests me, I get to weigh in. So I feel like that's very timely and consistent with, at least with the students who did reply, what they were saying. So I've got more to say about YouthLink and what they said, but I want to let others speak too. Sorry, Vice President Watson, your hands, excuse me, Vice President Shuey, sorry, I just converged two people, sorry. Go ahead.
That's okay. Ironically, that was one of my discussion points for today, but I'll get to that in a second. I wanted to say first that I appreciate the mention of policy and making sure, Director Aras, thanks for raising that we can make sure that our policies are in different languages and accessible. I raised this question also before and had been told that we were in process. So I'd be really curious to find out where we are, like sort of what percentage of the way there we were back then. I seem to recall, and I don't know if it's accurate, that it was sort of lower on the percentage, maybe 25% or something. So I'm curious if we've made progress. I know that we've got a lot of parodies, and personally, I also understand that there are some things that are a bit more time sensitive in terms of people's day-to-day lives. And we also are going to be going through admin and central office cuts. So I know that this can be difficult, but I would love to hear where we are on translating those policies. And then the second thing I wanted to talk about is microaggressions. And I'll start first with saying that the word microaggression itself is a microaggression because it's looked at from the perspective of the person who commits it. So to me, it's a very useful concept, and we've been able to have great dialogue about things that people do inadvertently or intentionally, but not realizing the impact. And that's the classic intent versus impact. And the reason why it was coined initially as a microaggression is because it is something that seems little to somebody, but it actually has a pretty significant impact to the person who is the recipient or the victim of the action. And so one of my good friends many years ago coined the phrase self-macroaggression because it's actually, if you look at it from the person who's been impacted, it is a macro impact, and it's stealth in the sense that a lot of people don't see it. So the problem with microaggressions is that a lot of people, if you raise it, you become a problem or you become somebody who's oversensitive. And we have come to a point where we do talk about microaggressions sort of casually, but I want to just remind us that the microaggressions are not just like a concept, they're happening day to day. And as an example earlier, and again, it's not a criticism, but it is it's that feedback of let's continue to be really aware of the things that we do that we do sort of naturally because it's always been done that way, and we need to try to change, like with the video, try to have the subtitles on for people who need closed captioning or whatever the different different experiences of people. And so one thing I'd like to raise that is something that in true form of microaggression, people may consider petty, but is actually important because of how important it is. And that is, and President Serafan, this is again, not a criticism, but and I know that you are always very good about my title of vice president, but it is something that for, it's been several months that I've been vice president, but it is very repeated that I am referred to as Director Shuey rather than Vice President Shuey. And I think that most people who are in a marginalized position are very loath to even raise it because you can look petty, you can be criticized behind your back or to your face for being petty, but I raise it because lots of people are not going to raise it. And if you don't interrupt that and you just keep accepting it, then it'll just keep happening. And so I encourage everybody to think about those things and also to not unfairly judge people who raise it. Because as a woman, as a person of color, you're always aware of the pressure to conform and to coddle and to be like, oh, if I say this, is the person who's my boss or my boss's boss going to be upset with me because they think that I'm too petty or they think that I am not normal enough. And so a lot of you have heard me talk over the couple of years that I've been on the board about the coddling, which I think the conform and coddle is a problem because it stops us from really making that progress. Because when we self-censor, because we have pressure to conform and coddle, then we don't have that dialogue that pushes everybody. And so I'm having the dialogue about the title. And I also want to mention that there's also the microaggression that can take place by people who are in power, who are, because of race, because of gender, because of sexual orientation, who are more in the dominant culture, who may say things like, oh, it's not important to me. It's okay. For example, you can call me by my first name. But if you are a woman, a person of color, that puts us in a position of being, we're not as nice, we're not as approachable when our titles are important to us. And it impacts people differently, whether they're called by their first name or their last name. So I wanted to put that out there as food for thought, because over the last year and a half, I have seen a lot of this happen. It sort of flies under the radar of almost everybody, but I wanted to bring it to the surface. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other director comments or thoughts? I'm happy to talk more about YouthLink, but I want to make sure that, or about board representation or all of that. Director Chu?
Well, you might want to start with your youth link comments, because I'm going to talk about tonight the having a student representative, that policy. And so if you want to lead.
Yeah,
that'd
for
be great.
sure. I mean, I think, I was curious to know sort of how to, I know that you were also exploring it from a WASDA angle. I know, I was curious to know what students would say, because when I asked around other districts, the norm, and I cross-referenced it with our general counsel as whether superintendents, like our students were saying, it'd be great if we included students all the way who were interested from 6th grade through 12th. Like we didn't say it should only be high school. But the norm in our state is non-voting. It's an advisory vote, usually 2 representatives, and it's usually high school. It was interesting that what students essentially said, it's kind of mixed. Not that many of them fully filled out the survey, but most said, we think high school would be great. You might want to consider middle school too. They talked about how do you ensure that those students are really getting the full input? You know, they're coming with the full value of the representation they're supposed to bring. And then that spawned a couple other things. So it was first, how many years would you think? There was kind of general consensus, 2 years, maybe 1, but it's going to take you 1 to figure out maybe what you're doing. So 1 year, 2 years, I would say a tip towards high school, but a possibility of middle school too. What was interesting was when I asked, well, what kinds of things would you want to weigh in on? They were like, you know, what projects you're going to launch, what policies you're going to do that directly affect us. They also, though, said, you know, it would be nice if there was another way where board directors could find a way to mentor us, or to have they said mentor from official publicly elected official. So they said official publicly elected officials, but basically I think they were saying, if you guys also know of other ways we could get an understanding of what it means to be a publicly elected official, it'd be great if you expanded that beyond just being a representative on the school board. So I think it spawned ideas that went beyond sitting on the board with us, which I think was well received. It also was, how can anybody, whether they're on here or not, give ideas in the moment, which is why I thought Director Aris's suggestion seemed very well aligned to kind of what they were talking about. And then the other piece was, started making me think about, you know, I like that we started, I think a year or 2 ago, having students speak at our board meetings and trying to pick from a variety of middle school and high school and schools. And I've wondered, like, okay, should we do more there? So I think it was nice, good, and maybe there's other ways additionally. So I'll just leave it there.
Great. Those are terrific inputs, and they can help guide the decisions that we'd have to make if we wanted to implement something. So I will share with you what we've been doing in WASDA. I was part of the group that ran our regional meetings this year, and we had two of them this spring. And I was very appreciative that Director Aris came to the one in the North End, and we had one in the North End and one in the South End. And one of the things that we brought were student panels so that you could hear from students from other districts, and kind of have a discussion with other districts who have implemented this in different ways. And it doesn't always, it's not always limited to 2. Our district to the south of us, or southwest, Issaquah has 8. Shoreline has 4. There's a whole host. The larger districts tend to have more. The reason there's so many is that most districts are smaller, and a large number of our districts are limited to 1 high school or fewer. So they tend to take them from the high school. I haven't talked to a district that uses middle schoolers to represent in that way, but I could imagine that we could still put together the supporting structure and the support group to include middle schoolers. There are many things that we could do. So What I really wanted to find out from the board tonight is if folks are serious. I've gone through a lot of the policies. There's over 100 of them, I think, available. I've gone through, Issaquah's has set it up so that they have the 8 students, but there's a meaningful way for each of them to participate. And so it's not cursory.
Can I ask one question about the 8? How do they, I mean, do they physically join the meetings or do they rotate?
So they are all allowed to physically join each meeting, but they use their sort of areas of policy governance. They use particular areas of policy and they assign particular areas to each student. And then when that's on the docket for the agenda, those students are the ones who are, expected to sort of present and take a more active role. I was envisioning that we might end up with 10 students on ours because you could have 2 from each of the larger high schools, the comprehensive, and 1 from each of the choice high schools. But the other thing is that how do they get representation? Well, what is the reason to have them on the board? First of all, one reason is so that they bring the voice of students to us. But the other is so that the presence of students is with us when we're making decisions. And while no one of them is going to reflect, or even 10 of them would still not reflect the full diversity of our students, neither do we, right? No one of us, nor do the 5 of us entirely reflect that diversity, but by having a presence of 5 of us and by having multiple students, you're engaged in conversations that bring the students to the forefront. What's very meaningful to them is ensuring that they have a meaningful role. By law, they are not able to have a vote. It's a legal constraint. So they can give advisory votes if you want, or they can simply provide feedback. We can decide what's the most constructive vehicle for them to provide meaningful feedback. And is that in discussions, votes, advisories? And what I wanted to ask the board tonight is there are a selection of things that can be done. I would be happy to take hold of a couple of these policies and kind of cross them into a draft that we could use to promote a discussion. But I don't want to put the effort into that if we don't have the consensus that this is something we're interested in. And I have asked both our outgoing and incoming superintendents, and both of them feel like we could have it set up for next year, but we'd need to move kind of quick. And I know our staff is pretty busy on policy work, so I don't know what kind of bandwidth John has to take this on, because I have not talked to John. So, but we probably would either want to allow students to apply in June or decide that we will get it done this summer and then invite applications in September or something. That is another decision we have to make. There are 2 other big decisions. One big decision is how do we want to select them? In almost all cases, it's an application process, sometimes with the whole board, sometimes with the work group from the board, like 2 board members and some other folks. But that's a decision we'd have to make. And then another decision that is made is who is their primary contact point. And that can range from anyone from a board director to the board coordinator, to the superintendent, to the director of student activities, to like every district has a different way of doing it, but the students have said it is important to them to have a point person. And then we would need some kind of onboarding and some kind of processes in place for them. And there are a lot of resources. WASDA has a lot, and there are over 100 districts in the state that have this in place. So, and none of them that I have spoken with regret it. In fact, one group lost theirs during COVID, and now they're in the process of bringing them back.
I am happy to give my thoughts. I mean, I've loved seeing at WASDA events when they have this, like the one in February when Shankar Vedantan was the speaker, when they had the students interviewing him. I mean, I thought it was really powerful, and I was thinking like, this is a great experience. I guess I'll just click off my thoughts. I want to be mindful of our time because I know we have people who are here already for our study session. But my thought as one person is, yeah, I don't know why we couldn't quickly like mobilize ourselves. I agree that it's easy for us to talk about it. It could fall on John's shoulders, but maybe we can try to take an active lead, and especially if we can leverage policies of other districts as a guide, so we're using work that's already done and maybe making it go faster. It feels like it's well worth it. I'm going to throw something out that'll sound nuts, but I just wonder, there's so many times when we pick the student who has the highest GPA or the most well-curated list of activities. Maybe we do it randomly. I just want to say it could be a lot faster, and maybe that's what we want for once. Maybe it's the student who's struggling and getting a D who finally gets a break and gets some mentorship. So then to your final point, I'm kind of intrigued by the idea of 10. I really thought most often I was seeing people talk about 2 or 4. So if it is 10, we could each maybe randomly get 2 students, and we are the ones who take that on so that the staff doesn't have to do that. It's an idea, but I would say double thumbs up from me. I think it's worth it, but I'd love to know what others think. And I do have one PSA before we get there, which is YouthLink has an event coming up, and I cannot attend because I'll be just flying back from something. It's on May 24th from 6 to 7:30 p.m., and it's their Community Leadership Awards. And they love it when board directors show up, and it doesn't have to be just one of us, and I'm pretty confident our general counsel will ensure that we can do it the right way so it's more than one board director. But I just put that on your radar. I think they really like it when board directors come. So, okay, so if Director Watson, Vice President Shuey, yes.
On that particular point, just a note that in your weekly update for the last couple of weeks, there's information on that. If you're interested, registering with instructions on who to talk to if you're interested in attending that great event.
Well, Patrick Alina also told me I could kind of make the invocation in our meeting, so
yeah,
I'm doing it both ways.
It's great, but the information is in the update if you need it.
Perfect, thank you. So I guess I would ask Vice President Shuey or Director Watson, do you have any thoughts about what Director Chu just threw out there? I feel like it could be. Yes.
Sure, I wanted to just chime in and say that I think it's a great idea. I've always thought that having more student input would be better than not having the formalized student input. So I like that a lot. And wanted to also say that I like the thought of a randomized lottery, people who self-select into it because they're interested in it. And, we would need to have some sort of set of guidelines of what the responsibilities are so that people know what they're lotterying into. But I really like that thought because it does provide us with better representation than some of the historic metrics that have been used to make selections. So thank you, President Saravan, for suggesting that. I'm going to echo that I support that as a possibility.
Okay, Director Watson?
Yeah, well, I think, the lottery idea is intriguing because of that. I think we also will have to make sure they do understand their responsibilities and have time in their lives to do it. But I also would like to go back and learn more about how that worked in Issaquah, because I was really intrigued when I watched a little bit of their board meeting, and they were bringing the students in and having them report on things. And since I don't completely understand their policy governance, I thought the kids were researching things to do with executive limitations or, I don't know, things that were coming up. So I think we could give it some thought and adapt it for here. But what I really liked about it is rather than sort of having unprepared kids sort of giving advisory votes on topics, they had an area, and then they dove into it, because I do believe that kids know things that we don't necessarily know. I mean, they know what it's like to be them and be in the schools and what's really going on there. So I'd love to hear that input, but I also kind of like the idea of having it focused so where they dig into a topic.
Director Aris?
I really like the idea of 10 as well. I think divvying it up by large and the small in that sense. It makes sense to me. I also like the lottery as well. I think maybe if you're doing lottery and making sure that our students are also doing their regular student tasks, maybe following something as similar to the athletics requirement to participate, so that there's at least a minimum bar of that. But to not limit to students who are always on who has all the spots.
Yeah, I think we're in agreement. And I'm curious, I want to also say Director Chu had mentioned about community service and revisiting it, and it feels like this ties nicely potentially to that. So
That's fine. At some point, I'd like to bring up the community service, but today I think we're done. For what I hear is a general consensus of interest. About, many years ago, I asked when we were choosing advisory groups that we establish any baseline criteria and then that we choose at random through, blindly at random to put people into those groups so that we weren't self-selecting with a thing. And somehow over the last couple of years, I feel like we've gone backwards on that, and it used to be in a policy, and I feel like the policy somehow got destroyed. So at some point, we should figure out whether that is or is not in policy, and if it's not, we should probably put it back. I think the idea of doing the same thing here is a great idea, and I'd love to include that in a draft. I would also say that we should be very careful about the minimum criteria. I think that we want to make it as minimum as we possibly can, because if there are folks who feel disenfranchised and unsuccessful in the district for whatever their reasons, but they feel like they want to engage and maybe change the district so that it can be better, I want to give those people a chance as well to participate. So I think we can set some bar criteria. As far as middle school versus high school, I think I might write this up with a focus on the high schools, because I think that tends. And what I've seen is 1-year term versus 2-year term. We can talk about it later, but what I've seen is that some places do a 2-year term, and it's kind of nice because they appoint them in off years. Like, so it's, you go junior, senior year, and then one kid graduates so that you don't have a turnover of the entire body each year. So that might be a nice option, but we also want to make sure if kids want to try it for a year and they drop out, that's okay. So I will put something together. It might be awfully rough, so that but it would give us something to talk about. If we could get it onto an agenda sooner than later, then we can give it back to staff or to take forward. So I'll leave it to the scheduling folks to let me know when you need it, and I will try to accommodate.
my sense is if you get something, since we've all discussed it, I believe I can work with our general counsel to start using our live document, and then in furtherance of a future date when we're going to come and talk about it as something on an agenda item. So I will work with her and see if I can get something out soon in terms of guidance for how we can do this as quickly as possible. I do want to ask one quick question of you, Director Chu. I resent what I had sent that day when.
Yes, that was my final comment.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, so just kind of how that netted out. I'm not saying it's a push. I just wanted to make sure.
When I looked at things that we could bring to WASDA as new positions, one of the things we try to steer clear of is creating positions that end up imposing additional requirements on a district, because those requirements, when they're legislatively imposed, rarely come with adequate funding, if any funding. So I think there's some space for some things about responsible use of technology and privacy and protections for students. But in the materials that you had sent, the emphasis was more on things that I found to be more of a district burden. And I think that over time I did not get a chance. So if you wanted to do something tonight, I could work with it in the break and try to come up with something. But I think the opportunity is going to be in regulations to make sure that any products that our students are using technologically, that there's adequate privacy controls, and that like the schools have the ability to monitor and keep our kids safe through the use of these products. And so I don't know exactly what that looks like, and I didn't have enough of a model in front of me or the time frame to kind of pull it together.
But it's totally fine. I would say it was a mix. I think the technology piece is there and there's often tools. It's more about the consumers understanding, like students understanding how oversharing, for example, leads to a security breach.
So
you can have the best technology.
Right,
if you put
are
out
you
data
looking for the
pieces-
state to then provide PSAs and things through the health departments? Or are you looking for the state to provide curriculum materials for schools? Or what's the ask?
I was thinking it could be, potentially, it could be PSAs. It could also be sort of modules that schools could use, or maybe it's an invocation of the state to provide the funding, even if it's nominal, to be able to ensure that that kind of teaching is included in the curriculum. Meaning part of digital literacy and modern literacy is to know how to consume information and what the impact of your creating information has on your own security and privacy. You can have the best tools, and if you overshare, if you don't use them well, you will put yourself at risk. So I thought it was inspired by the fact that I got training at work, and I thought my kids need to see this. And it's the kind of thing that even people who are relatively sophisticated, who should know better, need to be reminded of. And I thought, wouldn't it be smart if we did this sooner and taught our students about the ability to discern like misinformation and disinformation from truth, as well as what they do with their own information. So I don't have the ready answer of your point, which is what we would be asking for from the state. But I thought it could be encouragement. It could be money for a module. It could be sort of I've seen some of the resolutions are often a call to action for more to be done in this space. So if not this time, it could be maybe consideration for a future time. And I'm not saying we really must. I just wanted to make sure you knew I thought about, did I have anything else? Yes, Director Arz.
I have a alleged position idea I'd like to throw out. I had an opportunity to participate in an event put up by Make Us Visible, which is for trying to bring awareness and understanding of the Asian American in participation in throughout our history. It would made me think about how I know Bellevue does a fantastic job of trying to integrate all the diverse history that exists, but I'm not necessarily, my understanding is we don't have a legislative position in the history, or it's not at a state level mandate that we include all the diverse history that exists in our community, to lift those stories so that it's not about us and them, but it's about us, all, meaning including all of us and all of our history. And I wonder if this is something you get, if the board would be interested in creating a legislative position which encourages the fullness of the history being part of the mandate of our curriculum.
No, I love it. I mean, in fact, it's something that I'd spoken about with our prior superintendent, but I think it got lost, and it was actually a similar idea, but you could do it through the lens of immigration story of our country, meaning from the beginning, how did people come here? And it would have that inclusiveness, which I think is what, so I'm
And the
very
ones
much
that were
in
here
agreement.
before, sorry to interrupt,
Sorry?
but, and the ones before the
Yeah,
immigration.
agreed. I mean, if
Yeah.
you told it, including through even our Supreme Court decisions, you'd see the frankly, the brutal truth of how things have happened over time. And I think we're all in agreement. So what I don't know, to Director Chu's point, is how it would get articulated into the call to action for WASDA. But
Could we add
both
an
of these
agenda
ideas are great.
item after the final item before adjournment tonight to just come back to this? And I can help during the break look up whether or not there's a position, and if there's not, I can put together some wording that we could approve at that time.
Because if we don't get approval tonight, we will miss the window to submit, and you need your board's your full board has to vote, and you have to have the, approval of the board to submit. So I would be happy to help with that, but could we just put an agenda item at the end?
I think so. I don't know how our time will work out, but I will say I don't think it's an addition to our agenda, but I think we can do it through a motion. So it would be adding an item essentially after 9.2. So it
Yes,
would be
that's my
adding
motion. So moved.
Yeah. So is there a second?
Second.
So that would be us making an addition of after 9.2, a 9.3. Well, actually, it wouldn't be 9.3. It would be 10.1, which we already have. So it would be 10.4. We're going to limit it to 15 minutes just so that we can. Okay. And just to be clear, is that going to be on both ideas or one idea or?
Whatever anyone talks to me about that I can help you put together, you can present it then.
Okay. All right. Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
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 I don't hear any opposition, so I recognize, Vice President Shuey, had you voted?
I'm going to abstain because continuing to, many times that we've done much better, but we continue to extend and it's not ideal.
Understood. Okay. All right. The motion carries, but I understand it's an unexpected extension of our meeting. So, all right.
I wanted to ask
Director
a question.
Watson?
Yeah, I just wanted to ask a question about that. As you're putting this together as quickly, were you thinking about the curriculum, about Washington State and the people who compose Washington State, or were we thinking about also going into sort of the world history curriculum and trying to forefront some of the histories of, the people who are here or elsewhere?
I was thinking of all those who have participated in our American history beyond just the Europeans, but beyond the Black, the Latinx, the Asian, all, everyone.
Yeah, no, I love that idea. I had a book, which I just looked up, which is old now, called People of Washington State, and it had that. So, yeah, okay.
But you were looking at it Washington State or nationally?
I think it depends, and I would like to keep the language loosely open so that it could be encouraged in throughout the curriculum. It doesn't have to be specifically to a history class, but it could be you could integrate the experiences of, I'll give you an example. I'm going to pick on our incoming Dr. Aramaki. His family's contribution to Bellevue, right? That could be hyper-local to the national, but it's something that is meaningful so that we understand that we all come, we are all part of a larger community that had a positive impact and that it's recognized. So it's no longer, and I'm just going to call this out. One of the things people constantly ask is, where are you from? And that's even asked my kids who are born here in Bellevue. So I like to try to take that type of little phrases out. And it's not where are you from, it's what is your ancestry, right? It's not, we're all part of a community that is present in here.
Agreed. Okay. All right. So we will now recess until our study session, for which we had built in a 15-minute break. So I think that takes us to approximately 6:55.
Could I just call it by? Can I call it by title? Is your mic on?
Okay, we have returned from our executive session, which was 9.1. We now come to 9.2, which is the follow-up to our executive session. Do I have a motion? Yes, Director Chu.
Thanks. So I would like to make sure in completing our transition for superintendents and bringing in our incoming superintendent, we traditionally have a transition contract that helps us to ensure that that in addition to whatever other work they're doing, that they're able to also perform superintendent duties that go over and above and beyond. We've done this for the most of our superintendents in the past, and this should be no exception. So I would like to move that we approve the agreement between the incoming superintendent and the Bellevue School District as in our records.
I second your motion.
Thank you.
Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Aye. Okay, the motion passes, and with gratitude, we thank our incoming superintendent. Okay, so we move now to item, I believe we marked it as 10.4, and I turn to our legislative representative, Director Chu, to talk us through some of the items we had talked about in our director discussion.
Okay, so we have come up with two potential positions that we could propose to WASDA to consider in their legislative platform. And I'm going to explain how the motion works, and then we can, I don't know if Joyce is back on or not yet, but I'll just explain the motion part, and then the substantive discussion can happen when everybody's present.
Okay, I do believe she's on. She may not be just on camera just yet, but I will look to Jess to let us know if we're having any challenges. Thank you.
Okay, great. So the way this works is that if we have a position. Sorry?
I was saying that I was here, but it didn't sound like you could hear me earlier. Can you hear me now?
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so the way this works with WASDA is if we want to propose something for the members to vote on to make part of their platform, we propose it in a certain window, which we just have a few more days left to that window. And in order for us to propose it, our board has to have voted and approved it. We can't submit it as an individual member. So it's got to be the district. So, but the way that it happens is you kind of submit something, and then if they have similar positions that have already been submitted or that they already have, they might say, hey, can you guys work together and put something together that's like one motion instead of 5? Or hey, our legislative, they have a committee has gone through this and reviewed it, and we really think that it needs some work because we're afraid of these issues, or you haven't addressed this, or so could you take a look? And so it often goes through some editing with other districts or with WASDA members. And so the way that I have brought these to the board in the past is I'll make a motion that we approve what's written and that we approve with the latitude for it to be amended within a certain scope. So I'm going to read that motion so we all know it's in the email message. I don't know if somebody wants to project.
Director Chu, can I make one confession? My edit came across incorrectly. I meant to modify the word Arabic, and I accidentally modified African. So okay. It was written African American, which was just right. And I meant to modify Arabic to say Middle East and North African.
So we can definitely get there. I didn't put this in a document because we've been very engaged tonight. There really hasn't been time, and this was done last minute. So I appreciate everyone's indulgence. I don't know if somebody wants to project the email, but right now I'm just going to read the motion that'll be around these positions, these proposed positions, not the positions themselves. So the motion that I'm going to ask that we approve is that the Bellevue School Board approves whichever motion it is. We're going to look at one of them as a permanent position, and the other one we'll have to decide because Seema and I didn't discuss it. Legislative positions are ones that are very shorter lived, but permanent positions are those that are the core values of WASDA. So the one that Jane is worked with me to put together is a core value piece about curriculum should always be multi-heritage. It's not something that whatever. I don't know if the other one feels to me like it might be a legislative position. So it says the board approves the permanent or legislative position proposal to be submitted to WASDA, including any edits deemed appropriate by our legislative representative and backup board representative, and that are consistent with our BSD legislative priorities, any recent in the past 3 years board resolutions, and our mission, vision, values, commitment to equity and accountability, and strategic and annual goals. So that makes sure that we don't swim outside the lanes, but that we have some flexibility. So that's what we're going to ask for approval. And there are 2 positions. I think one is a permanent position, and the other one I'm going to recommend is a legislative position. And the proposed position, I feel like we should at least be projecting this somewhere. I just don't know that I am able to do that.
I can propose if you like. I put it just those 2 in an email.
Oh, could you project?
No, I was going to send it to Jess and have him try to project it.
Can Jess put it in a Word document?
Oh. I can put it in a Word document, but I just worry about just time elapsing. So I think our key thing is to just project it. Is your desire for the Word document for editing or?
Yeah, I think it'll be faster than to, like I said before, than to try to describe where my edits are, but.
Okay. I can't hear other people if you're speaking. Go ahead, and I'm going to just try to at least get these off as quickly as I can into something.
Hey, Joyce, since you're a little bit more savvy than rest of us here, would you mind doing that on the Word document? Well,
yeah. I won't save it, I guess. I have no place to save it, but I can, yeah. Oh, I don't have a place to save it, so then you guys can't be in the document, which was part of the point. Is Jess able to save it someplace? I mean, if not, I'll just talk through
I'll
my.
try to see what I can do. I'm going to do the best I can here.
Seema's taking
Okay,
care
and then in the meantime, Christine, I had a question about the 3 years because I'm not that familiar with the resolutions that were prior to me and Jane being on the board in the last year and a half. So is there a, a reason for choosing 3 years?
It just seemed to keep us to recency. I doubt you would find anything offensive. Well, we've done it for many years before. Yeah, Shannon was saying that's what we selected last year as well when we approved these, and it's what we've used previous years. And it allows us to make sure that our resolutions have some level of life and that they don't die or that they're considered irrelevant in just a year or something, but that they don't live forever either.
Okay, I think I'm getting somewhere. About to send, I think, what is a live document, I think.
Thanks,
I'm going to
Seema.
go ahead and send it to the 5 board directors.
Awesome.
We'll see if it works. And I think I sent it to Jess too, so that you can project it. Just your patience with 1 second as I get into this. I've not hit send just yet because I'm sending the live link, which just takes a few more seconds, but I'm almost there.
Thank you. And actually, if we can just talk about one of them, or unless we want to have it up, but one of mine
I
is.
think I just sent a link. It has both of them. It just got a line between them. It doesn't have the motion language or it doesn't have that language, but it's got just the stuff. I will just, yeah, okay. And I have the Middle East and North African MENA in bold with parens. I'm not sure it's all needed. I just put it in there. We can always modify.
And one of my comments is sort of conceptual is that we've got people who are, sort of long-term residents in the United States who are not American citizens. And I know that there's been a lot of discussion for decades about the term Asian American, in part because not all people of Asian ancestry are American. And it's the same issue of African American versus Black people in America. I mean, and so that was one area that I was hiccuping a little bit over. Like, I agree with the concept, but I think in terms of the execution, we're talking about people with, ancestry from lots of different places and not necessarily about nationality.
Joyce, can I comment on that? These are being written in rapid succession. I think your comments are fantastic. I believe that if we don't have something on the spot right now, right here, we've got a day or two before it has to go into WASDA, and it would be within the spirit of and I think the letter of the motion for us to
as
make.
long as we talk about it and that's what people agree on.
Well,
yeah,
even without, I think, I think it's fine to talk about it, but I don't know do you have the solution tonight? Because I don't know the right language and I would have to do a bit of research to get that right.
Yeah, no, I don't have the language. That's why I said I want to speak conceptually.
Yeah, so I think noting that that's an issue is legit, and then we should just go ahead. If we choose to pass these, then I will commit to following up with somebody appropriate. I don't know if we have someone on staff or what that can help me, but to do that. Seema, I'm trying to edit the doc, but I opened it.
Okay.
Can anyone else edit?
Oh, that's a mistake. Okay, let me redo that. Dang it. Sorry, folks.
It's okay.
Okay, here we go.
Joyce, do you know a good resource to get that sorted out for the right language? I mean, I suspect our district has some good language.
I don't know a good resource, in part because there is some controversy and just it's not well settled, I guess. It's not controversy. It's more that it's not well settled. People misuse the terms a lot, and even on the issue of African American versus Black people, because the history of Black people in the United States includes that they weren't always allowed to be American. Same with a lot of Asians. And so it is loaded. And then there are a lot of people who are in the US now who are not American yet. So
Kelly, is
yeah.
there a resource that you know of that could help us with this language? I mean, we just had our EAG here. I don't know if they have resources or you know any. Or yeah, or find somebody to help us get the right language. I don't even need anyone of like, maybe they can point to, this is a trusted source, it is controversial, but this source seems to be, you know, most broadly accepted. Or
Can I ask, is everybody able to edit now? Can you try?
Let's try.
Joyce, I recommended the Asian American and Native Pacific Islander because it is a term that is being utilized right now within a organization that is trying to lift the voices of that community and create a legislation or trying to pass a legislation in Washington along with the various other states in this across the country to make sure that the lived experiences and the history of that community is being included in the curriculum in the public schools.
Yeah, and I remember that there's a state in the Midwest of all places that became the first to integrate Asian American, require Asian American history to be taught. And I guess my point is that we have an opportunity to be a little more broad-minded than using that term, because there are a lot of people who are, one word that I have used, and I might have even heard it used tonight, is people with Asian ancestry, people with African ancestry, that sort of approach. So I don't disagree with the concept. I just don't want it to be inadvertently exclusive to the people who did not ever attain citizenship, which is a lot of people.
So would this work if you were to say Asian American and Native Pacific Islander ancestry?
I think American. I think what I hear from Joyce is
Asian
that
Native Pacific
Asian and Native Pacific Islander. I wonder if you need to say ancestry or anything. I mean, I think the point is that the people in our area come from all over the globe and they have different backgrounds, and that those backgrounds are relevant to our history. It's part of our shared history, both in the United States and outside of it.
And I might say ancestry and culture, because the reason is because there are some people who the ancestry is the reason for certain, racial and facial expressions that then people react to. That's the race. And then there's the culture and the ethnicity, which has to do with Asian culture. And so it's both that I think that we should be addressing and recognizing. I think the problem with just saying Asian culture or Asian is that there are a lot of people who are of Asian ancestry who are not culturally Asian.
Can I make a proposal? Could I propose that Jane and Joyce coordinate after this meeting on the language for this? I'm happy to walk through the WASDA submission process, but if you guys would spend a day or two to iterate and get this in a place that you feel, since it was Jane's idea and since you have all this valuable input, it might be great if you guys would just finish the cleanup together. I'm happy to do it, but it seems like you both have a vested interest and experience to do it.
And then how do we then it's like the motion and a vote would defer to her and me kind of thing?
Yeah, we've actually done that in the past where we basically have high level approved something, and then others have sort of, with a level of confidence and trust, you're not going to completely revise it. You're going to make
and I've been part of some of those votes. I just think that this one is really loaded because of the implications and the risk of leaving people out. But I'm happy to do that. I'm also thinking I'd like to.
My sense is that the timing is such that our window is narrow, and then it would allow the essentially proposer and the person who's brought up a great point to work it out. And I think our board is supportive of you guys doing that. So it makes sense to me.
Yeah, Joyce, is there a different proposal you would make and how we would address this? Do you have a different way?
I'm going to try to mark it right now. So a part of it is that it's really complicated that we are mixing geography with race, with ethnicity, and so let me take a stab right now while we continue to talk. I can multitask.
But
Oh, you don't seem to be seeing my edits. Why is that? Am I in the wrong one?
I can't edit.
I'm putting, no, I resent it and I made sure, I swear I did it right this time.
I think I was in the wrong one, maybe. I think I was in the first one. Hold on, let me see.
And I tried to put it in track changes too, so that.
Yeah, that is what I was doing, except that it might be wrong document. Let's talk about the other one first, maybe.
All right, so this was just a idea that where you have instruction, where technology is used, it should in tandem come with instruction around a level of instruction around responsible use, essentially grade appropriate instruction around responsible uses, potential harms, and essentially ensuring that at the right ages, students are understanding about how to be good consumers of technology-created information. So that's where the 3 sections come in. I just, having seen the WASDA resolutions in the past, they all get often merged and changed anyway. And so I think it's not going to be the final word. None of these will. They are likely to become modified to gain acceptance. So I feel like a lot of it, when Director Chu brought it up a couple weeks ago, I thought, why not put out some ideas of things that seem right, knowing that a lot of them don't see the light of day, as happened with our gun stuff for years. And they may end up becoming modified, but also enhanced with other people's input. So
actually, I think the process has been changed a little bit. So I don't think once we propose this, it doesn't get to be modified until next year, does it?
Right, but we can leave, and once we propose it, they could send it back to us.
Exactly.
And then ask us to make modifications.
And then also to gain traction with, let's say, the proposal from another district or another region's thing, we may end up settling on something that is essentially a merger.
Seema, what would you call your proposal? Technology, instructional supports for technologies?
Let me think of a title. I think it's if I can, I'll let you guys talk about something else, and I'll just think of something because it's about equipping students with awareness to use technology safely for their, academic and mental health success.
Joyce, are you on this?
I'm wondering, I was just going to ask Jess, and I think the technology is a little bit weird because I'm either interrupting you guys or you guys don't hear me. So apologies for if I have any interruptions. But
we hear you.
Is it possible that, okay, I had said a couple things earlier that there was no reaction to, so I think that it might be not working entirely correctly, but I am not, I'm still getting a read only, and I'm wondering, is it possible that because I had it already opened that I need to close out of it and
I think you do. I sent a new link, and so I think you
I did click on the new link.
There's a third link. She sent it.
Oh, there's a third?
Just make sure you have I don't know. I thought there was several. So that might help. I don't know. I'm just thinking.
Okay, hold on. I closed out of it, but I lost all my changes because I had to close out of it. I'll come back in. But I think I might have a solution. Do I appear to be in the document?
Uh,
No, it doesn't look like it. Oh, wait.
yeah,
it
you are.
does.
You're in it. It says you have the document open.
Oh, now it's showing up.
Says you're
Okay.
on page 1.
Yep, okay. And then my other question about it is the diverse communities across Washington State, because we teach, although we do teach Washington State history, we teach US history too. So are we intentionally limiting it to Washington State?
I don't think that was entirely, so one of the things we modeled this off of is we modeled it off of a policy. The only position that WASDA has on this type of thing is about Native American curriculum. So we modeled it off of that and the way that that one was written to kind of focus on a heritage that should be integrated into curriculum.
Okay. What I might consider doing.
It doesn't have to be, and I think it would be better if you could make it more broad, because there's a lot of history that impacts us that is beyond Washington State. And so if you have a better phrasing or
Yeah, I would prefer the
That's why I
broader.
brought up world earlier.
Yeah.
You know, the context that people were coming from and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I understand, Carolyn, what you're saying. Because the other thing is the other part that's political is the order. And I would suggest we start with Native American, as you see there, and then perhaps put the rest in alphabetical order. Would be politically the way that I would see it, is because, you know, there's so many foundational problems with, you know, what happened to Native Americans in America where we are. And so that would be my preference, and then the rest in alphabetical order. But does anybody have any thoughts about that? This is why I'm saying it's not that easy to just delegate, because it does have a lot of implications. And then Jane, can you explain I'm not as familiar with the Native Pacific Islander. There's Native as in Native Hawaiian or Native Tahitian, and then there's Pacific Islander as in like Filipino. So can you explain the political issue behind Native Pacific Islander versus?
I think you know what, we could probably Native Hawaiian and Pacific Islander. I think I forgot the H. Yes.
Okay, great. And there too, I think that, you know, there is this issue of indigenous cultures all around the world. In India, in Taiwan, in Hawaii, you know, here in the United States, it's a particular type of issue. So I don't know if we want to put indigenous in too. I know it's late at night, sorry.
So I don't know that we need to go spell it out that in depth, though we do. It is a space that we do need to talk about it in as part of the history. The reason I'm hesitant to go into that in much of a nuance is because we're going to forget something versus doing a certain amount of umbrella. I understand talking with people within that community from all the different areas, including the, you know, whether they're I think we may be segregating too much and then we're eventually going to miss out something.
So I'm gonna say something here. We want this to be correct, and we also want it to be passed. Yep. And right now, this is turning into something that has a high likelihood of not passing. Sorry, Carolyn? Oh, okay. No, go.
Yeah.
So
I think let her just finish her thought, and then we'll make sure you speak next.
So I think the sentiment that we're trying to get across here is that our history curriculum, or not just history, our curriculum in general is not inclusive, particularly of the diverse set of peoples who occupy this state that the curriculum is instructing. And I think if you want to unify WASDA and not turn this into a political position, then you want to think carefully about how to state that, like, how can you help people see the importance of creating inclusive curricula? So I wonder, my opinion is we as a board are in favor of this. I believe that we're going to take a vote and we're going to pass this because we generally support the idea that curriculum should be inclusive. I wonder if we could maybe simplify this, pass it, and then ask you guys to do some work on it and just keep the spirit of what we passed and like not try to write it here on the spot. This is a hard thing to write. Yeah. These are subtle things that mean a lot to a lot of people. And I feel that our likelihood of getting it right on the spot in this session is low. So I wonder if we could just state what it is we really want it to represent, which is we want inclusive curricula that reflect the heritage of the diversity of people in our community, our state of Washington community, that might be enough. You might not even need to get all the rest of this in, but if you want to, then it's gonna take some work to get it right. So could we either simplify this or could we pass it and just pass it off to you guys to clean up?
I would say, for what it's worth, I would be fine with the latter because I have confidence in Jane and Joyce, knowing where I think they're, the alignment that we have. So I think it would allow maybe and it doesn't have to even be in real time. You don't even have to coordinate schedules. You could offer edits and then, on your own time, go back and forth. But I think we've got a couple days. But I tend to agree that we might come up with something better, not in the heat of with the pressure of it being after 9 o'clock.
And I think the focus is the word that
Jane
Jane used. It's
Director Watson?
I'm sorry, I'm getting very tired, so I'm sorry for raising my hand earlier, but I'm going to ask you something that I think they may ask you on the state level, which is like, why don't we have Swedish people in here?
I did put European in.
You did? Okay. All right.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a fair point that if we list everyone, we will miss someone.
But then if we do it by continent, I think that what I have now.
Okay, that could be a good way to do it, yeah.
Because
if you can look,
yeah.
If you can look at what I did now, we might be pretty close.
Okay.
Because it gets across the concept initially, people with Native American, Native Hawaiian, other indigenous, and then so highlighting that up front because that is such an important part of what we need to recognize. And then the rest in alphabetical continental order, African, Asian, if I got it right, because it is late for me.
I think that's it. It seems like we're 90% of the way there, and that gives you guys space to do anything additional if needed. Does that sound good? Or
yeah, and I'm okay with it as is, unless you guys want to think about it more. Or I'm okay with if looking at it here, going with the motion that Director Chu, that Christine, that you said, with the flexibility, because this addresses my concerns of not excluding people who are not American, and it addresses the Washington and the United States. It doesn't address the worldwide, but
yeah. The only thing I will say in favor of the American piece is the following, and it's maybe a variation on what Director Ara said, is I can just share the number of times that we as a family were asked, where are you really from, was high. And my mother experienced this all the time. You have an accent, where are you from? And that whole conversation was like it was a game. I get it all the time with my name. And so it is saying you're not really American. And that's kind of where that all went. And so I can see the value of saying when people define American and then they look at someone whose ancestry suggests they came from the continent of Asia, that they're conflating one's ethnic origin or ancestry with their contribution as an American. So I can see why one would ground in the question of it's not the number of years you've been here or your ancestors have been here, but it's the contributions and choices you're making. So I could see why we would ground that in that piece of it, is all I wanted to say. And I don't know that means we need to write something differently, but it may be relevant when you're explaining it later.
Yeah, I am a little bit concerned in the way we have named all the continents, because then this is no different than, or you'd be seen as just world history. And so, whereas the point of doing this is to lift the voices of the history of the community that lived here and has contributed, and to acknowledge them, and also root our students in that history, that here is your history. This is more, and it's diverse and it's rich. And so by start naming all the different, or I guess by geographical, whatever, you're starting to take away the American component. And so it is a little bit, or it could be seen differently. So that is my concern with this. The ask that was brought to me was to lift the voices of our community. And so, I don't know, I'm concerned that this is getting very wordy and it's going to be taken differently, and then it's not going to pass.
All right, here's what I'd like to propose.
I need to talk for a second about the technology piece, if that's okay.
Actually, I want to make a motion and close on this one.
Oh, okay. I thought you were doing them together.
No, they're
okay.
separate
All right.
motions. So I'm going to move that the Bellevue School Board approves the comprehensive multi-language instructional materials permanent position proposal to be submitted to WASDA, including any edits deemed appropriate by our legislative representative, that's me, and backup board representative, that's Jane, and that are consistent with our BSD legislative positions, any recent past 3 years board resolutions, and our mission, vision, values, commitment to equity and accountability, and strategic and annual goals. Once I have a second, I have a comment.
Seconded.
Second. Okay. I would like to just note that because we've had this conversation, we're not going to change. There'll be no difference in board action. I believe that it would be appropriate if Jane wants to consult with any of the other board directors to get this done. So because it's not a board action, we're making the board action now, and we're within the scope of the board action. We're empowered to make some modifications. So we'll bring it back as whatever is finally submitted. What I've done in the past is I just bring them back as information to the next board meeting and say this is what was submitted to WASDA.
Okay, before we take a vote, I see Vice President Shuey's hand was up before your motion, but I thought she might as well come in at the discussion point. So go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to, I mean, if you want to stop discussion, then I will vote against because I'm not prepared to vote in favor right now. I'm sure that you guys will have the votes to move forward. But if you want further discussion, then I'll explain my viewpoint when it comes to integrating American. Well, I'll just go ahead and say it.
I think it's worth you sharing it because it's relevant no matter what on the edits.
Right. Okay. So thank you. The histories of the diverse communities across Washington State and the United States more generally grounds us that we're talking about people who live in these communities and we are part of these communities. And so the rest is talking about the ancestry or culture. And so if you read the way that I've redrafted it, it's acknowledging that there are people that live in our communities, including in Washington, that have these rich and diverse backgrounds. And it gets at the core of what we're doing without excluding people, because if we say Asian American, then it excludes a whole bunch of people and maybe some, of our own relatives who never became US citizens. And that's my concern with using the term African American or Asian American. But if you say that it's like all we people who live here, regardless of how many generations or how many years, and recognizing the rich diversity of background, I get exactly what you're saying, Seema. And of course, I'm no stranger to being asked where I'm from, but I believe that this language, as it's currently written, makes it very clear that we are part of these communities regardless of our citizenship.
I just added a sentence that I wondered if it might underscore the purpose, and
I like that.
We could actually remove it, but it might just close this piece just because we already have the word contributions up there, but it could be experiences and histories, and then you have contributions later. So as I was reading it, I was thinking maybe having a little more like belt and suspender on the purpose might close it.
Maybe the significant and diverse contributions, because it is that, I mean, that's part of the purpose, right, of this provision, I think.
Do we think we could take a vote now and have us all voting?
I'd like to hear from Jane, since it was her proposal, and see what she thinks, what's happening here. Okay, so I think this is, I'd like to strike the word significant, because who's to say what is significant and what is not? This is, right now I feel a little bit, this is getting kind of complex.
But you want this, you were hoping we would all support it.
Yeah,
and so
I
do think
understand.
I would say it's kind of late in the evening, and it was an idea and director discussion. So I do feel we're actually making progress for the timing we had on this.
Yeah,
So.
well, you're asking my opinion, so this is my thought. The sentiment of bringing this forward is that, being a person, having children going through the system and watching and seeing things that is not necessarily shared, and in fact, as an adult, learning about our own history of Washington that I did not learn until as an adult, it's sad to me how much I have not learned as a child, and that could have, I think, helped define and help ground me even more and I think that is a sentiment I see within our students as well, when they see people who look a little bit closer to them within the education system, within the community, and hearing stories and so on. So in our effort to be more inclusive in our education, to make sure that we are really lifting all of our students to help them build that success, I was more looking at as how do we make that for all of our students in Washington. So that is that inclusivity is the thing that I was kind of coming from. I appreciate all the comments and all the edits in here. I think it's great. My thought that I'd like to throw back at you is, as been to WASDA and sitting there in the legislative session or decision making of our positions, and seeing the discussions and the push and the pull, how can we make it simpler so it passes?
So I'm going to say two things. One, I'm going to withdraw my motion and allow Jane to make whatever motion she wants to make. And two, I want to say that I think you could put a period after Washington State or after in the United States more generally and put a small modifier on integrate the experiences, contributions, and histories of the diverse. Like I think communities and cultures across Washington State, and I think you might have something that would get the point across without adding so much detail. So I don't know if that's what would suit you, Jane, but I wonder if we should just give some space to this and do what Carolyn's suggested in the first place and just jump to the other position.
Okay, here's my thought. I too was the legislative rep. I don't remember things super short of 2 lines. And I don't think if it's too brief, it will actually have much traction. I recall what we did on other things, and they explained enough to be able to make people think, well, now this is really meaningful. So I think having it have the intent and the purpose could be actually valuable. So I don't see it as super long. I do appreciate that there's a list, and I think, but I think if we look without the track changes, it doesn't seem like the list is that long. I'm going to try to look at it without it in my version.
And can I say that part of the point of listing is that people will see themselves there. And I agree that maybe if I'm not sure whose screen is being projected, but if we accept, I guess anybody can accept the changes to show.
Yeah, I didn't accept them. I just showed it in my own personal view. I looked at it without them just to see how it looked to me, but I think it's just as it's projected. I don't know that we should accept the changes yet because I think it's still being.
But I think that we can do it for purposes of looking at it. And then just do is that Jess moving?
Yeah, it's just who's
I guess what I'd like to say to echo what Seema just said is that I do think that there's a lot of value in this discussion. It's too bad we couldn't have this discussion at like 2 p.m, but I think that this discussion has been really, really valuable. And it to me accomplishes getting the point across that there are people in our community in Washington and the United States more generally who have all these different ancestries. It identifies the many different places so that people can see themselves in each of the different continents that their ancestors or may come from. And it doesn't limit, which was my original concern, in a way that people felt like, well, I'm not Asian American, I'm Asian Canadian, but I live in this community, as some of my relatives are actually. So I even think about them. They've moved to the US from Canada and then they're not included, but that wasn't our intent. So that's why I wanted to accomplish all those goals, which I think accomplishes the really important goals, Jane, that you've identified of making people, giving people, all kids, an opportunity to see themselves in our history books and in our curriculum, while not excluding the people who have Asian ancestry but are not American. Thank you, whoever accepted them, just for purposes of looking at.
He didn't accept it. He just showed it without markup.
So I see. Okay.
You can see it.
But this concept of what's written there, I could vote in favor of, because it's, as I said, accomplishing all those goals, and I would be comfortable giving then authority and discretion to you guys to further tweak it, knowing that I don't want to exclude non-Americans of Asian ancestry. But Jane, I agree, it's your motion. Unless I can't tell whose motion is out there actually. Was there one Jane, one amended?
If we're hoping to do it as all 5 of us, I mean, I think if what I see right now seems pretty good to me. If others are good with this, do we want to move this forward and consider the next one?
So I was going to say, I know we're working hard on the words, but I agree with the general sentiment, if that's helpful. It's just I'm getting
So can we make that motion of what's there with discretion to Christine and Jane to tweak it as necessary, but without losing the identification of, well, I don't know. I appreciated the motion that Christine, you made and then withdrew, which I think was based on the revision, but maybe I misunderstood what you said.
All right, I'll motion to, how do I say this?
Just say, I move the motion.
I move the motion for the comprehensive multi-heritage instructional materials proposed permanent position.
A second. So all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, motion carries.
Good.
All right, we move to the equipping students with skills and tools to safely navigate technologies. This is a legislative position rather than a permanent position. I think 3 years seems reasonable, so I don't have an issue with it not being a permanent position. If others have comments,
Yeah,
let's just go with it.
Yeah. I'm trying to get back to where I was looking at it. Okay, so I guess I'll be okay with it being a legislative position, but I am wondering, that's the kind of thing that if you get traction on it, you can perhaps renew. And the reason why is I know we're talking about our current technology and the things that are going on right now with malware and the social problems that it's causing and so forth. But it's point number 3 about the misuse of technology in the form of disinformation, misinformation, and forms of technological deception. I think, we are thinking about those AI things that can doctor pictures and so forth. But I really want the kids to learn this piece about how to identify disinformation and misinformation. And I think what got to me in terms of like how long-term this position could be is that it's just, when you're talking about technology and its use in disinformation and misinformation, that goes back to the invention of the printing press. I mean, this is, something that happened in World War II, and it's something, that's just been happening all along. So I would just love it if our kids could come out with some kind of ability to analyze and figure out when people are giving them propaganda. But we can't solve the whole world with this. So, but I just wanted to put that idea out there that I'm not sure that this is just a short-term thing.
So Carolyn, Seema, I did not mean to imply that the legislative positions are limited to 3 years. They're limited to like the kind of, they seem more generational, frankly, to me, because they will be passed for like up to 5 times or 4 times, and after the 4th pass, then they become a permanent, or then they become a standing legislative position, and so they stick around. This is how we got comprehensive safety done, and then once people kind of had messed with it a couple of years, then we were able to get that into the permanent positions, and people recognize the importance. So it's kind of the journey that a lot of these things will take. I think the curriculum one, though, is like so clearly like it's very much like a one on Native American. So I thought that one would just go straight to permanent with. But I think it does have the opportunity to do what you're asking.
Are there thoughts or edits?
I think we need our, oh, sorry, Joyce, I'm sorry.
Sorry. Do we have a motion?
Well, you mean, oh yeah, to enable discussion. I move that we adopt or we enable, we vote to, the motion, yeah, that we approve the equipping students with skills and tools to safely navigate technologies as a legislative position proposal to be submitted by WASDA, to WASDA, including any edits deemed appropriate by our legislative representative and backup representative that are consistent with our BSD positions, any recent, as well as past 3 years, board resolutions, and our mission, vision, values, and commitment to equity and accountability and strategic and annual goals. That's my motion.
I like it, so I don't have any, discussion of anything. The only grammatical thing I was wondering is if technologies should be a plural with an apostrophe afterwards. But I can go with it the way it is.
In which
In that third line, around technologies with a possessive, but then.
Because it's technologies, it was intended to be possessive for.
Yeah, the possessive I get, I just was not sure if it should be plural because there are lots of different technologies, but I can go with singular.
That's fair. Okay.
Well, I can go with it. I wasn't sure.
So I don't know if you guys are looking at me. I was waiting to see if there's any discussion for proposed edits. If there's not, okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Motion carries.
So before you close, I need to ask that each of you who have proposed this, I'm going to need from you a small paragraph that makes the case for.
Sure.
If you could just send me that in email by Saturday so that I make sure we get this in time, that would be awesome.
Okay,
Sorry,
sure.
what was that, Christine?
I'm asking that the people who proposed these, like the initiators of these proposals, would give me an argument for to put in the WASDA handbook with them when I submit it. There's like an argument for, like, why would we want this position? That's all.
Sure. Okay, we're adjourned. Thank you.